In a galaxy far, far away, there exists a group of fierce and fabulous women who are on a mission to explore the depths of pop culture. They are the Galactic Gals, and they are here to take you on a journey through the cosmos of entertainment. From the latest TV shows and movies to a trip down the Milky Way of nostalgia, they will delve into the worlds of fantasy and imagination, bringing you insights and analysis that are out of this world. So buckle up, cosmonauts, and get ready to blast off with the Galactic Gals Pop Culture Podcast.
Greetings. We're
Hey,
back.
everybody.
2 weeks.
Hello.
2 weeks. Yeah. So today we're talking about our countdown of the best of the 80s sci-fi television movies. Our countdown, not Entertainment Weekly, not all colliders, us. So this
What do
is
you
gonna
got
be
in your
cool.
hand there?
I'm ready. I'm
Ah,
ready.
yes.
I'm going to try to solve this by the end of the
Yes.
stream, but you see like this one. I'll just put this one and go, I solved it. So that's
And I
what
just
I'm
want
There
to
you
say
go.
that I just want to say that I tried to find my old headbands and leg warmers, but unfortunately, we are on the show today. But unfortunately,
I'm
I
really,
couldn't.
really, really glad that went away. To be honest, that was a thing. That it's a good thing that went away.
You mean you don't watch the Olivia Newton-John physical video at least once a week?
No, Jerry, I'm not you. No.
Oh, mercy.
No, I don't.
Yeah. I remember,
in the 80s.
the checkered pattern. Yeah. The checkered pattern was always a thing.
Yeah.
And the like the Don Johnson jackets over the t-shirts and everything. That's
And
still
with the
style
Vans
today.
Oh,
no
I should have
socks.
worn. You know what? I wore that to a couple of Halloween things, but it's really kind of overcast and humid today. If I wore, which I have, my pink shirt and my Don Johnson jacket, I'd be collapsing by the end of this stream.
Darren Zone says, "What? No mullets?
Yeah.
No,
That pertains to Gary.
Yeah,
Not
Andy,
us.
where's your mullet?
I don't know. I left that back in the 80s along with my my rooster crow at the top. Like we used to. we used to curl our hair and we leave it flat at the back, but the top would be like,
big hair. Yeah,
like some
big
kind
hair.
of falcon on the top of your head.
I got to say, we've done the 60s and the 70s, and if you look back on the 70s had a lot of, really bizarre cultural things which defy all sense of logic, like pet rocks and things like that you just cannot believe that people bought into. But the 80s, I think, was a really interesting, like, fun decade. It was the birth of like the music video and everything and all that stuff. And it seemed, I was thinking back, it seemed like every weekend there was at least like 4 or 5 movies that were opening that you really wanted to see. I mean, there was always something to see. And now it's like, if there's like 3 decent movies I want to see a year, that's good.
There's barely anything like even on Netflix. You're just like, most of the time you go back to watching something you watched before that you love. I mean, it's like me. I'm flipping through. I'm like, you know what? It's Supernatural again. Or it's Doctor Who again. Classic Doctor Who. I mean, or Star Trek or something. It's difficult to find anything. And the thing I noticed about our lists is that 1985 was a phenomenal year for movies.
Yeah.
It really was. It was like the ultimate. Like, I remember so many good movies coming out in 1985, just like one after another. And it just seemed like a powerhouse. And now it's just like, you'll get one every 5 years. You might, if you're lucky.
Yeah. And they're so test marketed to death and politically correct that there's no sense of spontaneity or real invention. Everything now is just reinventing stuff from the 80s and 90s. So you figure like, 10, 20 years from now, if the world's still around, what are they going to be ripping off? Because everything today, a reboot of a reboot of a reboot. But, I just want to say one interesting thing about, the 80s, I think the 80s is really, like you said, there was a ton of great stuff in 85, including some absolutely iconic stuff. The first couple of years of the 80s, though, like 80, 81 was still kind of like the remnants of the 70s. People were still trying to find the next Star Wars or ripping off Star Wars or whatever. And the whole kind of like zeitgeist of the 80s hadn't really settled in yet. Then you had like 82, which, in just a second, I'm going to get started on this picture there.
Yeah.
But in 82, which I think is considered like one of the best geek years ever, because 82 you had Star Trek 2, you had Blade Runner, you had The Thing, you had Poltergeist, you had a literal laundry list of genre classics. And then and then in 83, after the Star Wars thing played out, when Return of the Jedi was over, then it seemed like people started moving into fantasy for the middle of the decade, because I noticed that there's a lot of fantasy movies that start around, like you said, 84, 85, 6. And then you get into the latter part of the decade where it's different genres, like the beginnings of steampunk or the beginnings of cyberpunk or sci-fi horror, a lot of John Carpenter stuff. So, you move through the decade and it's kind of a mixture of a lot of different things at kind of specific times. It kind of like evolves over the course of the decade.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it does move. And again, when we get to the 90s, I Jason was like, he's like, trust me, he's like, you like more from the 90s than you remember. And he started naming movies. And I'm like, wow, there was some good stuff in there. I just think it gets overshadowed with a lot of the crap that latter 90s, that's what I tend to focus on.
Yeah, especially the 90s, but especially kind of like starting in the 80s too, because the 80s was really like the kind of dawning of cable, right? And everybody was all the cable stations were being born and they needed stuff to fill. So a lot of times you had, like Annie and I were joking around yesterday with some gifts of some really, really, really stinker sci-fi shows from this era. And a lot of the as cable started booming, you had a lot of like syndication program starting in the 80s and 90s, and so they needed stuff to fill that. And unfortunately, most of the stuff they came out with was complete garbage, like in terms of genre stuff. There were some gems in there, and I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of the real gems, but there was a lot of kind of garbage. Yesterday we were joking about Small Wonder.
Yeah.
You know, and all those kind
of things.
And that was
later. That was after 19. I think after 85, not 95, 85. It started kind of like you know, slowly. But then when you hit the 90s and stuff, I mean, the thing I noticed about, we'll get more to the 90s when we have that stream, but it's much more angsty, you know, like Reality Bites and stuff like that. Just more like, you know, kind of like a slacker kind of films and things. So
we're going to be talking about positive, good stuff in the 80s. So all of you who tuned in expecting a 2-hour stream about Manimal or the powers of Matthew Starr or that kind of stuff, it's like, sorry to disappoint.
We'll have none of that.
Oh,
we'll have the best
Care
of the best of the 80s.
No Care Bears here today. Sorry.
I don't know. Care Bears is okay. I mean, it was happy, you know.
What about Smurfs? You want to do?
I actually did like the Smurfs. I actually did like that show.
I think Michelle has some bad history with the Smurfs, obviously.
No, you're gonna get it stuck in my head. La 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 la. No.
I had a friend who had the record. So.
Oh God.
So
wow.
Everything was Smurfy on that show. It's like, that's Smurftastic. It's like, stop making every single word a variation on Smurf.
Yeah, and it's a little crazy because like there's only one female. It's like, that's a male fantasy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Actually, that's a female fantasy.
When's the reboot of that coming? Because clearly the Smurfs is all about the patriarchy. Then it was early.
No, actually, it's probably more a female fantasy.
You know, I'm sure why hasn't it fallen onto the alphabet side of things yet? You know, I mean, God, just give it time.
There's a whole deeper side of the Smurfs that a lot of at the time, I remember there was people coming out saying it was a very communistic cartoon. So even back then, people were like raising hell about some of the stuff that they were feeding kids. But you know, it was like a commune. Everybody was, you know, everybody worked together and everything was everybody else's. It was kind of communist.
and you know what was weird? The 80s were also, we're not going to talk a lot about cartoons. The 80s I remember was the decades where, you know, growing up, you know, every September there was all these great new lineups of all the cartoons on the networks of Saturday mornings.
Oh yeah, it was great.
And then all of a sudden in the 80s, everything became about being a toy commercial.
Oh yeah,
I mean, like every show was about advertising, you know, a toy, whether it's the Smurfs or He-Man. And He-Man was great, but that still was, I mean, all the shows like that, which were advertising, and then they became about video games. They made cartoons out of video games. And it was all about Pac-Man. And it was all about video game cartoons on Saturday morning or merchandise cartoons on Saturday morning, and it was terrible.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, we should do a stream about the good Saturday morning cartoons. That'd be something fun to do. Because there was
that would be fun to do.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. I have a lot of my favorites like right there. So yeah, absolutely. That would be great. All right. Before we get in the 80s, can we talk about this picture?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
This is one of Jason's all-time best. I saw this and it was like, oh my Lord.
Yeah, I wanted to do 80s. Like I wanted to have an 80s feel with the hair and, you know, I mean, we do a lot of our posters are kind of the 50s and 60s, but I think for this case, since we're doing 80s, it should be 80s. And I swear to God, the girl on the right to me looks like Donna Dixon.
It's got Donna Dixon. Bosom Buddies, absolutely.
Yeah, Dan Aykroyd's wife, also known as Dan Aykroyd's wife. Yeah. It gives a cool vibe, and I like the background. And
I want to get. I'm serious when I say I really want to get an art print of this one because this is just.
Yeah, I need to get serious about finding another place that actually does reasonable prices and better work. You know, some of these places like Redbubble, they're okay, but they're overpriced. So that is going to happen at some point.
Jason surpassed himself with this one. This was just a knockout to me.
Yeah. Yeah, there were several
brilliant.
others, but I think.
Oh no, I mean all of them have been great, but this one I don't know. I guess it just was.
I just think they get better and better.
Yeah.
I
So,
like some
bravo.
more than others, but pretty much it seems like that this get progressively better. It took a little bit to get this one because again, a lot of the stuff we use is 50s and 60s. So
you're right. This is great because like all the wind-blown blonde hair.
Yeah, and the
Mhm,
uniforms are kind of like, more 80s style, and it just the colors, it's like pinks and blues and purples was kind of an 80s thing. So
when we get to the 90s, since that's the era that Baywatch started, will they be wearing the red?
I don't know. It's whatever the AI machine spits
the red
out,
Baywatch swimsuits.
Sure. As long as they're covered and I don't get like a,
a strike,
a strike from YouTube,
Oh man,
because I'm all about like, look, hey, sex sells, if you got something nice, pretty, people will click on it. Bottom line.
That's right. Absolutely.
So I'm fine with
yes,
it.
I
as
am
long as we're not like completely
early.
nude, I'm not going to do that. But I know Neil Hardeman would be very unhappy with that. He would be like, oh, why not? But we're not.
Yeah, and our thoughts and prayers go out to him because he's having to go to a funeral today. So Neil, we're thinking about you.
Grandmother died.
Yeah.
We miss you and love you, and hope to see you again. So let's get started. Although this poster is beautiful, I could keep this up forever, but we're gonna start with you, Gary.
Don't worry, that's on my alternate screen. I can stare at. Oh, here we go. Yes, the original, I repeat, not the current reboot, which I could do 2 hours on how bad that is. But this is one of my all-time favorites, Quantum Leap, 5 seasons, a show which everybody now seems like they can rattle the premise off, but it seems like at least on the show itself, they had trouble kind of describing the premise, like the beginning of the show, because it was so strange and so offbeat. And now it's just people can go, oh yeah, he's jumping around in time, leaping into people's bodies and putting right what once went wrong. But it's a brilliant concept from Don Belisario, Scott Bakula, and Dean Stockwell. The chemistry of these two are just, off the chart. Sam Beckett at some near future time, as the picture there, scientist, a way to leap. Although they never really explained what the original, if that was the original intent, because their original intent can't have been, oh, I've invented a way to leap back into people's bodies where they will still see me as them, because there's no way that could have been their original intent for this experiment.
Probably
but anyway,
not.
But in the original series, at least, they make it fairly explicit that God kind of took control of this and then started leaping Sam around for his own purposes. And as you can see there on the top left, the observer, Al Calavici, who was back in the original project at the correct time, but then he can appear to Sam as a hologram to give him information from Ziggy the computer about who he is, what year he's in, information about the people and situations around them, what they expect is going to be or what they calculate is going to be the situation that they've got to fix. They've got to put right somebody who either died or made a wrong turn in their life, or a crime was going to happen, or an injustice or something. And he had to act as that other person, to put things right. And then on the bottom left, you can see that when every episode they showed at some point Sam looking in a reflection, so we could see then how everybody else, who he was, what the body looks like. And it was a premise that could have run for years and years and years. Obviously it's plus it was genius, the fact that he could only leap around throughout his own lifetime, which prevented a lot of cheesy, like, medieval shows, and all this kind of stuff.
And they would have done that had they had gotten the license to do that.
Yeah, it kept it focused on real people in recognizable settings, you know, with songs, with cultures going on. I mean, at one point, you know, Sam leaps into the Watts riots of 1965. And one of the best episodes, he leaps into himself as a young boy, to, you know, he gets a chance to visit his family before things fractured and went wrong. And then he leaps into, you know, a soldier in Vietnam, in his brother's unit, you know, and everything. And I mean, and they kept it, except for the last season a couple times, he did leap into real people. I mean, famous people, except for a few episodes, I think, in ratings grabs in the final season. But he always leapt into, you know, Joe Public, ordinary people, men and women. He leapt into a test monkey for the Air Force in one. And when he leapt into developmentally challenged people, he still was affected by their situation. It wasn't all of a sudden, you know, he still had to struggle to think and to talk and everything. And so, and Scott Bakula, you know, could play any situation that the writers came up for him. You know, I mean, however outlandish it was, he took it on and he was always believable. Just lastly, I think my two favorite episodes, one, he leaps into like a small theater adaptation of Man of La Mancha, where, you know, he has to prevent, so he encounters his old piano teacher who, as a boy, he had a crush on. And that gives a lot of chance for Scott Bakula, who was a Broadway star, to a lot of singing of the Man of La Mancha in that episode. My favorite episode, though, is one called Private Dancer, where he leaps into kind of a Chippendales guy from 1979.
I remember that one.
He's there to help a deaf girl become, or a deaf young woman get her life on track, because otherwise it was going to divert into, you know, prostitution and drug use and everything. And he helps her become like a dancer in this dance troupe and everything. And so that was, there's just a lot of great episodes. So did you two watch or like this one?
I watched a little bit. My sister was a huge fan of Quantum Leap. I mean, she's not into science fiction, so it tells you it's, you know, I watched a little bit. I wasn't a major fan, but I appreciate it for what it was. I mean, if that makes sense. I haven't watched every episode. I may eventually go back and try to do that, but yeah, I watched a little bit. I mean, I think everybody did a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces of it, and I noticed it at our local, you know, used bookstore. I forget how much it was, but the whole series. So it might be something to go in and purchase. I mean, I wish we could do stuff like that now, you know, and go back in time, like say, 5 years and fix things. But, you know, it is what it is.
The thing about it, the great thing about it was, it's like the premise, of course, was science fictional in terms of, you know, leaping around. But the stories that he got, once he got there, it was all about very grounded, human, relatable stories where he is trying to, you know, hindered by the fact he can't tell people who he is, and everybody says, why are you acting so strangely, and this, that, and the other thing. So he has to maintain this kind of cover of the person in whose body he's in. But other than that, it was their dilemmas were, you know, very, you know, relatable, grounded. Everybody can relate to wondering, if only I'd gone left instead of right in my life, where would I be? I know that I fall prey to that probably far more often than is healthy, but it's a natural human quandary that everybody thinks about, you know, about something in their life. And so it's very relatable. The one thing about, and you know, they've come out with it on Blu-ray, but the reason I have this box set, which is the UK box set, is because unfortunately, when they released this in the US, there was so many problems with music rights, because every episode is filled to the brim with like the music from the decade or the year that they're in. And they had so much problem in the US with the music clearance for the DVD that they just did these lame elevator music cover versions of it. And the music is so much a part of creating the atmosphere of every episode that I just had to go and actually get the one that actually had all the original music, which the UK one.
Yeah, they're really weird about rights and stuff like that. And to me, it's like in my opinion about that is like the artist should be happy because you're basically it's an advertisement for your music.
Yeah,
it's an advertisement for people to get back into your music, and so I look at it that way. So I really think that that's just a weird way of looking. It's like I know they need to make money, but you got to understand, it's like free advertisement. I'm putting your song in my show, and there might be a whole new generation that might have never heard that song and might go, wow, that's a great song. It creates fans and it creates revenue, but it doesn't work that way, sadly. The thing I do remember about the show is that it seemed to have a very comedic element to it as well.
It did. It was never making fun of the characters. It was because Al was this kind of womanizing guy who wanted Sam to take advantage of whatever situation, because like all the women around, it's like Al would go off and kind of be his little horn dog thing.
Yeah.
But it was the humor that really arose from Sam trying to grapple with his situation and kind of get around. But
I remember seeing the one where he basically leapt into a woman and for the first time, I think.
Oh yeah,
I do remember that one, and I thought that was very comical.
Trying to figure out lipstick and all.
Yeah, and just seeing him like all. Scott Bakula is a nice looking man, but he definitely does not make a nice looking woman. So seeing him when you look in the mirror, obviously he looks, but then there's parts you see him where it's Scott Bakula. I mean, from what I recall. And
he still had to get, he still had to get made up in the clothes and stuff of the body whose person that he was in, because obviously that's what they saw. But that episode is where I think he leaped into like a young, very attractive young secretary in the early 60s having to deal with all the sexism and problems of that time. So, yeah, I do remember that one. And there were some other ones that I watched. But again, Jason's probably watched the show more than me. My sister was absolutely a huge fan of the show. I remember back when it was on, because I remember her talking about it incessantly. And again, she's not a person that likes science fiction, but she really did enjoy the show. And maybe I'll after I'm done with Stargate Atlantis and some other shows, anything, maybe I'll give it a go. If you've never seen, anybody who's watching this who's never seen the show, only stick with the original by all means. And I cannot state this strongly enough. Stay away from the current reboot, because I gave that about like 10 episodes, and I was literally had 3 pages of notes about how bad it was. It is the reboot is a horrible show.
I would have first of all, and nothing against if you choose somebody for their acting ability, that's great. It doesn't matter what color you are if you're the right choice, but they obviously like race swap the character because everything's about diversity now. That was obvious, right? And he just looks very bland. And and if they chose a white guy, it would just been a bland looking white guy. It's just they don't know how to cast anymore. They don't cast characters. They cast cardboard. That's what they cast now. So that's, to me, I even if I haven't watched the original, there's no way I would watch the new show versus this. There's no way.
I agree.
Because I think the one thing. No, I'm sorry. Michelle, go ahead.
Oh, no, the old series, from the bits and pieces that I have seen, it touched on every single thing that you could possibly think of that every single person usually goes through. And that's what brings people together. Mm-hmm. In that one panel here, you have Scott Bakula, he's looking at himself in the mirror and he's a black guy. Okay, well, so he's touching on civil rights or something in maybe that episode, and then you said the one where he leapt into a woman or a child or somebody with Down syndrome. That's everyday life. And if you can touch on each of that and bring light to it in a positive manner, then hey, that's something good.
Right.
You know,
And
just
the thing about it
again,
was,
this didn't need
yeah.
forced.
And it was definitely not a message show.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you go through, you know, a lot of tumultuous times Sam Beckett was born in 1953. So that means the span of the show, he could lead from anything from 1953 into what at that point was the show was on in 89, even though Project Quantum Leap, you know, where he left from was set at an undetermined time, like a few years in the future from that.
Okay.
But he had that, you know, very tumultuous time in American history, you know, from the mid 50s, especially the 50s and the 60s, you know, but it wasn't like today, you know, would be, and a lot of my picks, I think if they were redone today, would be done with all the kind of, you know, sledgehammer, you know, hack subtlety of so many movies and TV shows today. I'm glad this show was, which the current version falls prey to a lot, but this show really avoided. It was very, you know, well done.
They knew how to make their point without having to force it.
Yeah.
That's
right.
That's what a lot of these reboots are doing. And that's the problem, you know. Some things don't need to be remade. You know, leave it alone. This is probably one of them. And if you're going to do it, then you better. And my thing is, like, if you're going to do it, get the original people involved and get their opinion, you know, because they were part of it. And if you're going to do it right, and make it better than the original, which I've not watched all the show, but I can tell you that the reboot is not better than the original just from seeing the clips I've seen of the reboot. So I'm with you. And here's some facts. Gary probably knows all of these. Probably the funniest one that I chuckled when it says Dean Stockwell, who portrayed Al, suggested the character cigar habit as a way to get free cigars for 5 years. It's a man of my own heart, man.
Heck
That's
yeah.
awesome. So,
have you seen the price of cigars? I mean, gosh, my son smokes them.
I'm with you.
And they're wow, yeah.
I like a cigar every once in a while.
But he wasn't just, I called him a horn dog later, which was maybe unfair to the character because, I mean, he was a naval admiral. His character was a naval admiral, which is why he could be connected and play such a key part in what was a government-funded program, which was Project Quantum Leap. So his character wasn't just running around ogling all of that, was a definite part of his character. And sometimes he could prevent Sam from making impetuous, emotion-driven decision because it's like, no, that's not what we're here for. We're here for this, not for that. You know, and so you have that kind of thing going on too sometimes.
So
thank you, Maggie. Thank you.
Yeah, Maggie's awesome. Maggie is my true crime co-host. Coming up eventually.
Well, the current Quantum Leap reboot is a true crime. Yeah,
we'll cover that.
Here's the thing, really quick.
Maybe we'll have a stream about, like, you know, the murder of legendary shows.
So, yeah, you know what?
There you go.
That would be like an all-day stream.
Who've done it?
Here's the quickest way you know the reboot's terrible and could only happen today. So the premise is the same. He leaps around. He has like spotty memory because the other thing we haven't mentioned is the initial leaping Swiss cheesed his memory. So he doesn't remember a lot about, you know, his own past. I mean, he knows things, but he doesn't remember all the details because it kind of like blew out his brain. So he struggles Al has to remind him of basic facts. Like, for example, we don't know until the beginning of the 4th season that Sam's actually married. But Al's never told him that because he doesn't remember. But for example, for the new show, the observer is actually a woman who is the fiance of the guy who's leaping. And she's the one that basically, at least in most of the episodes I saw, she's the one with all the agency. She drives everything. She tells him what to do. Do this, do this, do this. And he's basically just very passive and goes along with whatever, of course, the woman, you know, it's like he's the male character, so he has to be emasculated in order to make the female character the driver of the show. And that's only one of the things that's wrong with the current version.
But don't watch that one.
No,
watch
don't.
The
No.
Don't even bother.
No.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next one.
Okay.
of Gary's choice,
Oh, is
which
it
is
me again?
Alien Nation.
Okay. Now, this is, I don't know if you've never seen this, of all the shows we're going to talk about today, at least of my shows, run out and find this. This was a fantastic show. And thank goodness that this was done at the time it was, because then this just points out, if this show was going to be done today, this would have been. So this is based on, this was on Fox. It was on for one season. It was based on a movie from earlier, I think the year before, 1988, with James Caan and Mandy Patinkin, using the same premise of, in 1991, a spaceship lands in the Mojave Desert containing these aliens called Tinctonese, but they are a slave race who's basically on the run from their overseers, who are a race that has enslaved them. And they land in the Mojave Desert and then start assimilating into Los Angeles society. And James Caan in the movie, the great Gary Graham here for the TV show, plays police detective Matt Sykes, who is partnered with this alien who is George Francisco. And the show from, again, and this is why the quality was so great, Kenneth Johnson, who, if you were with us in the 70s, was the man responsible for the Incredible Hulk TV show, The $6 Million Man, Bionic Woman. And so, of course, the thing with the movie is they set up the premise, but then it descended into just another cop, 80s cop action movie. Mm-hmm. But it took Kenneth Johnson to really want to dig into, he said, like, there's so much here. That it's not a message show. There's a lot of social commentary in the show, but Kenneth Johnson, of course, was able to, approach it and keep the entertainment value of the show paramount while also putting in social commentary. So Matt Sykes, who's not a bigot, but he's kind of prejudiced against, these aliens coming. He doesn't know how to handle them. And so it's him partnered with George, and there's George's family, his wife, his young daughter, his son, who's kind of like a rebel, and this other woman, Kathy, who's like works in the medical examiner's office. And so it's about them going out to solve cases, but it's also about the Tinctonese people integrating into society. So, of course, there are, I don't want to say, issues because it's not an issue show, but of course you have elements of racism coming in about how minority groups are treated, but it's done, like I said, with the entertainment value still paramount. And Kenneth Johnson, of course, who takes these properties that you think, well, they can't do a TV show of that, and is able to mine all of this great stuff out of it. For example, on the bottom left, I think is from the pilot of the series where they're trying to bring their young daughter to school, and there's all these people out in front of the school protesting. It's like, go back to your town. They want to put the newcomers in their own little segregated areas, and Matt Sykes has to come in and basically diffuses the crowd by, he's a cop, he has a gun, and he puts the gun to the little girl's head. He goes, just don't worry, everything's okay. And he says, why don't we just kill her? He says, oh, go ahead, I'll just kill her right now. Why not? And of course, then everybody who was protesting goes, oh, no, you can't do that. And it's like, why not? That's what you want. And so that's how you write a scene like that, where you make your point about who's in the right, who's the wrong, who are being the a-holes in this situation, but doing it in such a way where it's not like Sledgehammer. Really quick, so this was on for one season. It ended on a cliffhanger, but I don't know why Fox canceled it, but they almost immediately regretted their decision and got such public outcry that they brought it back for what turned out to be 5 television.
I was going to say, did I get that wrong?
No, it was 5.
Okay.
They brought it back for what turned out to be 5 2-hour TV movies over the course of like the next 3 years, which is kind of like a de facto kind of second season. But So there you go. Let's see. Like the first, and the TV movies were like bigger things. Like in the first TV movie, the overseers finally come back to reclaim all of their former slaves, and Gary Graham and his partner, played by Eric Pierpoint, have to kind of stop them. So the situations got bigger and more kind of movie-ish during the TV movies. And I did not know that about the alien language being backwards English. Wow.
I remember the show advertised. I remember the movie. I don't think I ever saw the movie either.
The movie is not. You don't need to see the movie, because the pilot, the 2-hour pilot of the series, sets up the character, sets up the premise, so you can totally ignore the movie.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I knew about the show. I don't I remember coming on Fox, but it was kind of like, looks interesting, but I never really delved into it.
No, it was really well written. Like I said, it's Kenneth Johnson, so it's going to be
it's going to be like Incredible Hulk level, right?
Yes,
at least.
And then you have in one of the pictures, you had Matt Sykes, who slowly over the course of the season is falling, in the top left picture, falling for Kathy, and so he's having to confront, this, does he really, he struggles with trying to overcome his own original premises. He's kind of like developing this relationship with this one. So there's things like that too. It's very, very well done.
All right, so let's go in the next one.
Max Yay! I forgot to put that. Yes. Yes.
Here we go.
You.
Now,
thank you.
If you were alive in the 80s and watched television at all, not even this show, and if you remember,
the commercials,
New Coke.
Yeah.
Or no, it wasn't New Coke. What was the Coke that he advertised? It wasn't New Coke. It was.
I think it was New Coke.
Was it? I think it was New Coke.
Yeah, okay. I think it was, unfortunately, because New Coke sucked. But
it did.
And that wasn't around for long, was it? Like, was it around for like a few months before they pulled it back or something?
Yeah, something like that. And it tasted like Pepsi. That's exactly what New Coke tastes like to me. It's like you might as well just get Pepsi.
You don't have do either of you have like an unopened can of New Coke in your garage somewhere? Or?
No. No, and I remember, I distinctly remember after the debacle of New Coke, I remember my mom bringing home Coca-Cola that said classic on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had to had to do a lot of backpedaling and kind of
they did.
Okay, this is the classic, people. Start buying our product again. Because it really almost ruined them. So
too bad
and we were
Budweiser can't do that.
I was just thinking that, Michelle, because boy, they could, when Coke saw it was going wrong, they immediately, it's like, whoa, they pulled the brakes and did a U-turn, and all Budweiser can do is double and triple down. So it's like, all right, good luck.
Yeah,
but the thing about Max Headroom, the thing about Max Headroom is that, I mean, he was everywhere. I mean, on commercials, whatever. And it was like, talk like this, with the thing behind him and everything.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing. So if you were around in the 80s, you had to remember Max Headroom. But what I'm actually going to be talking about is the very short-lived, the TV series. It all started with, there was a Catch the Wave. There you go.
Yeah.
So basically, in 1985, there was a 1-hour British TV movie. Well, it was just 1 hour, called Max Headroom: 20 Years in the Future. It was set in this dystopian near future. And what happens is Matt Frewer, who plays investigative TV reporter Edison Carter. Now, this is a world where everything, I mean, literally everything, is controlled by television. Network television basically is the supreme power. Even the governments make their decision based on what's going to convenience the TV networks. And Edison Carter is a investigative reporter. He's one of the few that will investigate even against his own network or what's going on. And through an incident that happens, he is injured while investigating a story, and the kind of evil people basically take his mind template and kind of create, because he's the highest rated guy on the network. And so they try to use this kind of like AI template from his brain pattern to create something that could take his place. And it goes rogue, it becomes its own thing. You know, it's kind of taken by this kind of pirate, you know, television network that operates out of a van, and that character becomes Max Headroom. So that was just a one-time British show. And then for about 3 years, he basically was like a VJ on a British music video show. He would later on interview celebrities and stuff, but he was basically kind of like a VJ for British pop videos on these shows for about 3 seasons. And then ABC in the US bought the rights to Max Headroom, and it became a dramatic show, which was great. The same premise, the same near future dystopia run by the TV networks, and the same premise about how Max was created. In the original kind of short film, Matt Frewer didn't interact with Max, but of course Max becomes a member of this, and so a lot of times Max is in trouble that Edison has to help out, or sometimes Max doing what he can, you know, when all the tech and stuff is able to help solve the problem. So Max actually is a character, you know, in the science fiction drama of the episodes, not just making funny comments on a screen. And so the premise is just Edison investigating stories. But the thing about it is with this series is that it was only on for like 14 episodes. This show, quite sadly, is far more relevant today than it was in the 1980s. They could show this series now, and somebody would think that it's written based on that it was just written last week. Not only how you have the televisions basically running, the television networks running everything. It's like, well, yeah, that's not what's going on anymore. You have, I mean, for example, things like the government basically in this show makes a rule that you can't, like switching off your television is a crime or something. Yes, I would vote for, yes. Matt, that would be, I think they should. I absolutely think they should. That'd be great. But listen, I just wrote down, here's just a couple of the concepts from some of the episodes. And you tell me if you think that this was a show that was made in the late 80s or just last week. There is one episode to deal with blip birds, which is basically these high-speed commercials, which they found a way to collapse the bit strength of commercials into these high-speed things, which zap into people's heads. So they can get like 20 times more commercials into their heads, but it basically causes like their nervous system to overload and they blow up, basically. You have episodes about AI, like Max fighting other AIs or AIs being manipulated to control people. You have one episode which was about a TV network, not the one Edison works for, but another TV network financing terrorist attacks to then cover them, then get ratings. You have a scam to rig a gubernatorial election by the numbers that the TV networks put out. You have something called Wickets, which is basically like they have like this addictive subliminal signal in game shows, which makes you want to buy more or do more. There's an episode about like pay-per-view education for homeless children and how one of the networks subverts that. One of the final episodes is about these what they call baby grow bags, which are these designer babies that are these designer babies, which are basically then stolen from the parents for the government or the TV networks to use for their own ends, which is only in my mind like one step away from the government wanting to usurp control of the kids from their parents in schools. I mean, that's not like a million miles different. So all of these premises that they came up with in the show, which all the ones I just rattled off, it's like they could have been written last week about our current situation. So this was an incredibly prescient show. It was only on for 14 episodes. It's out there, so find it. Max is a great character. Clearly Michelle likes Max. Did you watch
yes,
the
yes,
Max
yes,
shows
I
a
did.
lot?
And I think you can watch them on YouTube. I think that's where I found them because I fell asleep one night listening. Everything in that show, it's like going on right now. I mean, boy, if they knew then what we're going through now, it's mind bending, and
I watched it as a kid and it went over my head, but now I would get it.
Oh, absolutely.
More.
I think
exactly.
that, as an adult, you would absolutely love the show. I mean, a clever use of a way to put the character of Max Headroom in an ongoing dramatic show and still have it work as more than just a gimmick. The great Jeffrey Tambor, who was in this series as his producer. I don't even know what word you would use to describe her best. The luminous Amanda Pays as Theora, who was basically Edison's partner, and then a couple years after this, she was on, if you remember, the TV version of The Flash for one season back in the 90s. She was also on that series. But a lot of great people, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. The original 1 hour British TV movie, it's weird calling a 1 hour show a TV movie, but that I know is on Facebook, Michelle, too. I watched that on Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, not on Facebook, I'm sorry, YouTube recently.
YouTube, yeah.
And I'm sure all of the 14 episodes of the actual series can be found different places. Oh yeah, we've got to talk about the Doctor Who tie-in to Max Headroom, which is the infamous thing in 1987 on one night, a still unknown to this day person wearing the Max Headroom mask and with the weird stuff behind him, like all the zigzags and stuff behind, hijacked a signal from WGN in Chicago, which was like 20 seconds during their sports news stuff where it was just him on it, and then they fixed it. But then later during a broadcast of the Horror of Fang Rock, which is about 2 hours later, the same guy in the Max Headroom and there's like a ton of videos on YouTube still analyzing who was the Max Headroom hijacker still to this day. But that was on for a couple minutes, but that involved the Max Headroom character pulling his pants down.
I heard that, and I don't know if this is true, but wasn't there like a scene of like porn through one of them too?
It wasn't porn. It was, as such, it was what the Max Headroom character in this hijack video, and the mask looks like a Reagan mask. It's like one of these oversized. It looks almost like a Reagan mask. But it was clearly supposed to be Max Headroom with the sunglasses and everything. But apparently, he turned around, kind of mooned the camera, and then there was another woman there with like a fly swatter who was like swatting him. And all this stuff.
See. Okay.
And so, which actually sounds better than most of the TV shows that are on now, anyway. They probably get higher ratings too. But and then they got it. But to this day, nobody knows who that. Nobody's ever admitted. Probably, I don't know if it's because they could still get into trouble or if they couldn't prove it. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's the point now? It's been so long. It's like that's just like.
Where were you on that night?
Where
were you both on that night in 1987? Were you you weren't the ones who was wearing the Max Headroom mask hijacking?
It might have been me. I don't know. I'm like, what? Screw this Doctor Who shit. I'm gonna like put this Reagan mask on because I loved Reagan. So yeah, it could have been me.
If you're gonna hijack a Doctor Who story, don't do it with a good one like Horror of Fang Rock. Do it.
I wouldn't have done that. Even back then, I would have recognized it. Okay, this is. I like Tom Baker even back then, so it wouldn't have been a Tom Baker episode. It'd been like a Peter Davison episode, like Kenda or something.
Just as Adric's about to blow up, Max hijacks the signal and comes in and. There you go.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next one.
All right, the next one of my all-time favorites from the 80s, Greatest American Hero.
Awesome.
A great
Very
show
awesome
by
show.
Stephen Cannell, which was not, I mean, yeah, on the surface you say, well, yeah, it's a parody of Superman. But the great thing about the show was not a farce. The show, obviously, it's about Ralph Pinkley, who is a school teacher who, through permutations of plot, gets involved with this FBI agent, this gung-ho FBI agent played by Robert Culp, and they are out in the desert one night, and the spaceship comes down, gives Ralph the super suit and an instruction book about, how to use it, which when the FBI agent, drives away, Ralph starts walking and of course loses the instruction book right away. So the series is him trying to navigate the use of the super suit without any real idea about how to work on it. So whether it's powers of invisibility or whatever, he doesn't know how to control him, doesn't know how to fly. The thing about it is though that, and of course we all remember what I think was did it get to #1? The Joey Scarberry theme song in
it was
1981,
all over.
Believe It or Not.
Like, I believe it did. It was like on the Billboard. It was very popular.
Yeah, which of course drove people to the show because it was called the theme from The Greatest American Hero. And so it was Ralph and the great Connie Selleck as his fiance. The thing about it is Robert Culp is great because he plays one of these kind of old time, gung-ho FBI agents who always wants to kind of, weed out the commies and stuff. It's like the D's, dares, does, dems, we have to get a scenario to do it. He wants basically he wants to use Ralph for the big things like going and stopping the commies and doing all this stuff. And Ralph basically just kind of wants to use it wherever he can for good for the common person, whatever. So they're kind of at extreme ends. And the Connie Selleck character was perfect because she was kind of like the normal kind of person who can kind of navigate through this as they're on either ends. And you can see in the middle, he doesn't know how to fly. He always crashes into the wall. But the three of them together were a great team, great chemistry between the actors. The premise may have seemed silly, but the key to it was the characters were never made fun of. Ralph was never like this, geek or a goon or somebody who was like a klutz or a nerd. He was an honest, earnest guy who, wanted to use the suit as best he could. Robert Culp was great. He would tolerate Ralph's flights of being Don Quixote as long as Ralph could help him with a serious case once in a while. It was a really, if they would have made fun of the characters, the show would have gone off the rails really, really quick. But the fact that all the characters were written as intelligent people, grounded, but in a ridiculous situation, made the whole thing work. And a lot of great music in the show, not a lot of like real time, like real songs like Quantum Leap did, but like cover versions of other songs. I can't remember the guy who did all the kind of cover versions for the songs, but he was really, really good. And so it ran for, 42 episodes. So it was about two seasons. And again, by Stephen,
I remember I was very unhappy when it was canceled. I remember being a kid because this was kind of like a show that I dearly loved, and so it was sad to see it go because I just wanted more.
Yeah, the pilot was great. My favorite episode is one called Operation Spoil Sport, which is the aliens come back, they bring Ralph and Bill out into the desert, and they basically let them know that this rogue, basically doomsday weapon called Operation Spoil Sport has been kind of taken over and the world's toast, unless they, deal with it. And normally this was the only episode where Ralph and Bill had to deal with this kind of like apocalyptic kind of comic booky save the world situation. The stories were usually a little, much smaller than that. But, that was a good one. But they did a lot of great stories. And I think it's finally remembered, if for the song, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. I remember I liked the song a lot. Um, and I remember it being really I remember the first time that it was played on the radio and I got real excited because I mean, this was kind of like I was into this as much as at the time as Wonder Woman or you know, The Incredible Hulk. It was kind of like it was something different, you know. You didn't see that like here's just a normal person because it was
Mhm.
relatable, you know. As a kid, every kid would want to find a superhero suit, put it on, and have all these powers. So so for me as a kid, that was like, wow, that's cool. You know, like I would like that to happen to me, you know. And then what made it better was is like he didn't know how to do it. So that also made him relatable because like he didn't
Hmm.
have any idea what he was doing and he was just like accidentally, you know, uh solving these conundrums. And I you know, Robert Culp was great in it
He
too as
was.
well.
He was brilliant.
And you know, I just remember being just enamored with the whole idea that like, wow, I can really, even though it's a male character, I can relate as a kid because that's every kid's fantasy. You know, you find
Yeah.
a well, at least it was
Right.
mine. You find an alien spaceship, and then you find a superhero suit, and then you're like, you're a hero. And so I
Hmm.
thought that was really resonated with me as a kid and others. Um, it was I just remember like I haven't seen it in years, but I have that very warm, fuzzy feeling when I think about the show. Um,
And
haven't
they, I
watched it
mean,
in years, but it might be need time for a rewatch.
there was another great episode called "You Don't Mess Around with Jim," where Ralph and Bill encounter the previous uh, user of the suit and his kind of, you know, Robert Culp equivalent, who actually then allowed themselves to be corrupted by it and use it for their own ends, like for,
Right.
you know, getting greedy, amassing a fortune, you know, whatever. And so there were a lot of interesting uses of the premise. I think the problem, I don't know that this is necessarily a show that could have gone for 4 or 5 years. I mean, it was really good. I mean, I was sad when it left. I'm glad though it didn't have one of these usual things where a show that stays on too long and kind of,
Hmm.
you know. And then in the second season or the last season, they got a lot of use out of, you know, Ralph and Pam, you know, finally get married, and then that kind of creates a new dynamic and everything. But they actually did Time Mechanic. They did a pilot. They did a reboot pilot. I want to say like this would have been pre-pandemic, so I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago. And I don't know if it was going to be on for like one of the main networks or whatever. But of course, it was race swap. I'm not race swapped. It was gender
Gender swap.
swapped and
Probably
race.
raced and gender swapped, I'm
It
sure.
was race and gender swap, but it got no further than the pilot. I don't even think the
And
pilot's
I'm sure
out.
time. I think
Yeah.
Time Mechanics being sarcastic.
No, well,
Um,
but yeah, I mean, but it has been a reboot has been attempted, but thankfully
it didn't happen.
it didn't.
It's kind of like that Dark
Yeah.
Shadows reboot that they keep threatening that I'm like glad it doesn't get the money to do.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad when you're happy about not something a reboot coming back that of a show you love, but these days you can't be too careful. So
for the early part of the 80s, that was a really strong show. And then this is my one movie
yeah, you
in
chose a good one.
the list. And
I rewatched this recently too.
I love this is my favorite horror movie, and it's by far my favorite John Carpenter movie. I love this movie. This is The Fog from 1980. This was his second. It was his first movie after the surprise monster hit of Halloween from a couple of years before. This is very different, though. This is not a slasher movie as such. This is a ghost story, and this takes place current day, a little seaside town in Northern California called Antonio Bay, and they are having a 100th anniversary of the centennial of the founding of the town. But unfortunately, the way the town was founded was the original town fathers basically caused a ship in the late 1800s to that were full of lepers who were going to be forming a colony a small distance from the town. They caused that to be wrecked on the rocks, and their money, their gold was stolen and anything. So now on the 100th anniversary, of course, the pirate ghosts of those lepers come back to wreak vengeance on the town. And, as happens, of course. And so you have Adrienne Barbeau, who is the main character, although she doesn't meet any of the other main characters on the top left. She is the voice of the town radio, the kind of sultry voiced disc jockey who is, plays the songs at night. And of course, you can then see the fog coming. And the first part of the movie sets up the menace really well. Strange things, unexplained things keep happening, but not bad enough to where people start to freak out. Just kind of unexplained, disappearing bodies on a boat or things like that. And most of the movie takes place on the night of the celebration as all these disparate characters and a lot of like screen legends, like Janet Leigh is in this movie. She plays the mayor of the town. Her daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, right off of Halloween 2 years before that with John Carpenter. Tom Atkins, who's been in some other John Carpenter's movie. Hal Holbrook as the kind of dissolute priest who comes to realize the true history of the town and what they have to do to combat it. So it's about all these kind of various characters playing out their own stories during the movie, but then having to kind of band together at the end to kind of escape with their lives, basically. And the music, it's one of these like great John Carpenter, minimalist like songs like dun 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 dun.
Yeah,
dun,
he's
dun.
an amazing composer. He really is. He actually writes music. He's an amazing composer, and I don't think it even gets enough credit because it does make the movie, especially in this movie and Halloween and others. He's just he does a lot of his own music.
The music, the mood and the atmosphere in this movie is just spot on perfect. The first scene basically is an old seaman played by John Houseman, basically
telling the story.
Telling the story to all these kind of enraptured kids on the beach during this overnight camp out on the beach. And he tells the backstory, which is a really clever and effective way to get the backstory about the sinking of the ship and the history. Not that the ship was lost, not the fact that and the founders were the one that caused it. No, not that part. That is later. But just as him setting up the tone of the story, it's like it's 2 minutes to midnight. Time for one more story, and all the stuff. And just from that instant, it's like you're in the midst of this ghost story. And like I said, it's my favorite horror movie, my favorite John Carpenter movie by far. There's a couple scenes which are a little bit kind of graphic and not just kind of ghost story. But those were actually injected at studio insistence later when they thought the original John Carpenter's original cut was a little bit too soft. It needed more, obvious grue and horror. So that's why the couple of those scenes were injected in.
Right, and even those scenes are, because John Carpenter is all about ambiance. You know what I mean? Like he's not. Like if you've watched the original Halloween, it didn't have a lot of blood and gore.
It was none.
More like
there was no blood in that movie that you see.
Right. So even for John Carpenter, it's still like gore light. Even I wouldn't let your like little kids watch it, but I mean I probably would when I was a kid.
It's a ghost story. It's like when you see this one house which has all like the glass front and you see the fog rolling in and then you hear like this knock on the door and this old lady's going to the door. You're sitting there saying, don't go to the door. Don't go to the door.
And she tells the little kid to go in the other room. And you're just like, and at that moment I can put myself, in that little kid space thinking, oh, and he's hearing all this stuff, and and then she's on the radio screaming, trying to get to him, trying to say,
that's her
"Get out of
son.
the house." Yeah, Stevie Ray, which I think is hilarious because Stevie Ray Vaughan, but yeah, it's an eerie, it's a slow, it's a kind of horror show that I'm into. I like the slow pace. It has a lighthouse in it. There's a lot of just eerie scenes, and and there's a lot of character actors in the show too, which is I think helps it. Like the two guys on the boat, especially Buck Flower, who's been in a lot of John Carpenter movies. In fact, I watched another one that's on this list this week that he's in, and he was in They Live, and he's just pretty prominent in all of them. That kind of
like to reuse a lot of the actors,
right? And I love the H.P. Lovecraft nods, talking about Arkham, and a lot of because obviously Carpenter. I'm a huge Carpenter fan, so he's really big into Lovecraft. And he uses a lot of those Lovecraftian sea town elements that I adore. So I rewatched this week along with another one that's on my list. Spoilers, I've got a Carpenter one on my list that basically made me want to do a Carpenter retrospective stream, because I love his films and I love the music and I love the vibe of his horror films, because they're not gory. Most of them aren't. Very few are that I've seen personally, and I like that about it. I think
the main setting of that was actually a real lighthouse that when Carpenter and Deborah Hill were scouting up in Northern California, they found that up at Point Reyes. And I love that we don't have a picture of it here, but there's a scene where she's just going to work, where Stevie is going to work. She has her album, she's going to work, and she has to open the gate and go down this long downward
300 steps, by the way.
Steps to get to, I think that's to emphasize later the fact that she's so isolated out there.
And she really did walk down 300 plus steps.
Isn't that the most gorgeous setting that?
And I love that the stairs, when she gets there, then she has to go up the stairs up into the lighthouse, which again makes it eerie, because you already know when you start watching the movie what's going to happen. She's going to get trapped in there.
Have you seen this one, Michelle?
No, I haven't.
You need to.
It's not gory. It's not people being hacked every 5 minutes. It's not. It's a moody. It's an atmospheric ghost story, is what it is.
It's worth a watch. It's very suspenseful, and again, it gives you. I don't know. This is a good Halloween show if you don't like gore.
Okay,
I watch it. I seriously. I'm not kidding. I seriously watch this at the very least every Halloween, because, like I said, it's my favorite horror movie.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if Gary's saying it's not gory,
well, where does it? You're a Carpenter aficionado. Where does this fall in general in your overall Carpenter?
It's up there. He does so many different things as far as he does horror, sci-fi. It's up there. I think it's Halloween is actually dropped on the list because I've seen it so many times, and it's just old hat because they've made so many movies. It's kind of watered it down. But it's up there. I think for me, In the Mouth of Madness is probably my favorite Carpenter film.
Oh, okay. That's the Sam Neill one.
Yeah, which that has a little bit more gore, a lot of weirdness, but still a great effective film. But this is up there. The Thing as well. The Thing is probably number 2. The Fog being number 3, and The Mouth of Madness 1.
Okay.
And another one on my list is probably number 4. But it's not really horror, but it's science fiction. So, and I love Christine. So there's just so many. I mean, again, we're gonna do a retrospective of John
But this
Carpenter
is one, Michelle. I honestly do think this is one you could kind of safely watch without, having to look away or wash your hands or whatever.
Okay.
Like I said, and the couple of instances where it is kind of like that are just like super quick, because I think they were put in there because the studio said, no, we want to have a little bit more gore, but it's really fast. There's some jump scares. There's a couple of really good jump scares. But overall, really, really good. It seems like a lot of people in the chat
we
like this one too.
John Carpenter film on this channel, which is They Live. So,
I have seen Yeah, I've seen Christine, so and
Yeah,
I like
I'm a huge
Christine.
fan of this
That's
movie. I love that
one of the
movie.
ones I do like. Now, did John Carpenter? Did he also do Gremlins?
No,
Or is
No,
that
that was
somebody
Joe
else?
Robert
Dante. That
No,
was
Zemeckis.
Joe.
somebody
That was
else.
Joe Dante.
Oh, Joe
Dante.
Dante. I thought
Okay.
Robert Zemeckis
It
was
did Joe
involved
Dante,
somehow.
who then later did Inner Space.
Okay. Ooh, another my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be talking about Robert Zemeckis later in this stream.
Okay. Well, I'll have to check that out
Okay.
then. So
No, but
So-
this is if you just like mood and atmosphere, it's kind of like basically, you know, like if you tell a kid like a favorite kind of like scary bedtime story and they want to hear it over and over again, it's kind of the thing.
Mhm.
It's like it's something that you, even if you're like me, you've seen over and over again, it's still great. I want to see these facts that you put up. Oh, it earned 20 times what it cost to me. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was low budget. It was considered low budget at the time, which is like amazing to me because if you watch it now, you're thinking, yeah, I mean, at the end, it's a little cheesy, right? But at the same time, when you saw that as a kid, when I saw that as a kid, because I watched scary movies as a kid, that scared me. The scene with the ghosts at the very end with Hal Holbrook, that frightened me.
Yes, that's a scary.
Um,
That's yes.
Right.
No spoilers.
But yeah, but I'm just saying though, it's a very slow burn and it's definitely worth watching. And
But
a
it's like
good
it sets it
Halloween
up. It's like all of a sudden, all
Yeah.
the ding at the gas station start going ding, 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 ding with the pumps flying out of their
Yeah.
holders. Like,
Yeah.
why is it happening? It's a real slow setup.
It's a slow burn. It really
Okay.
is. And yeah, it's definitely worth
Now,
watching.
I got to say before we go from this, the next to
Okay.
last bullet. I mean, I didn't see the remake, but I heard it
Oh,
is
no.
absolutely beyond awful. It's the one with Tom Welling from Smallville, and
Oh.
they literalize everything that was just left as an undercurrent in this movie, and I've heard it is beyond awful. So if you're going to watch The Fog, watch the one from 1980.
Yeah. Never watched the
Okay.
remake.
no. You gotta see the original first.
And I will say I
so,
love
yeah.
John Carpenter, but don't watch Village of the Damned either. And that was a remake that he did.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, and it was just wrong casting.
And what about the Chevy Chase one that he did?
I've never seen that. So I'm
Okay.
going to have to, before I do a retrospective, I'm going to have to kind of go watch the ones I haven't seen. And I don't know if that will be one, but I'll try. That's what I'm going to say. Okay, so we're down to Michelle's.
Yay.
Yes, the never-ending story. Yes.
Yeah.
Watching that, and I've seen. I think there's 3, but this is my favorite one because anytime I read a book, I'll get that deep in the story if it really grabs me. And it's a bomb could go off beside me, and it wouldn't faze me because I would be so invested in those characters. But this, I mean, just fantasy, sci-fi, whatever you want. And I think with a little bit of a small love story, but you have this kid, Bastian, and, he's kind of a geeky kid. He's like a loner. His mom, I guess, I think she died. And he's trying to find his way, and he gets, he's bullied on his way to school, for the lunch money. Of course, it's always the lunch money, like, gee, that's, a lot of money in the 80s, really. News to me, and then he runs into this bookstore, and the owner of the bookstore is like, get out. We don't have toys or games here. All we sell are books. And he's like, I know, I have 147 of them, and he's like, oh, comic books. And he's like, no, The Last of the Mohicans, Journey to the Center of the Earth. And he's naming all these books. And he's like, what are you reading? And the kid asked the old man, he's like, oh, this is a book. It's not for you. And then the phone rings. And so, of course, what does every kid do when they're told no? They do something anyway. And he stole the book. And he, runs to his school, and looks in his classroom. It's like, oh, math test, crap, And so he ends up going up into the attic of the school and sitting down and pulls out the book and reads the book and just goes on this great adventure. And he meets Atreyu. It's in that top panel there. He's the little Indian boy. and he's a great warrior. And at first, when they mention great warrior, he's thinking a man. Well, in Indians and their cultural beliefs, warriors become men at a young age. And so, there's Atreyu. And you go through the story, Bastian reads, but you're living it through Atreyu. And it's very, very interesting of all the trials and tribulations that they both go through. Bastian feels what Atreyu feels. And when Atreyu is hungry, Bastian stops like, oh yeah, I guess I better eat, and he pulls out his apple and starts eating. And he's like, no, I got to save some for later. And you meet all these other characters, and this in this series or this movie, the nothing is coming and taking away this fantasy land, and Bastian has the power to rename the empress there in the ivory tower, and he finally gives her a good name, and everybody ends up saved and everything. And then at the end of the movie, the luck dragon Falkor, who I always wanted a luck dragon, because I would like to be able to do what Bastian did and have the fantasy crossover into reality and go flying through the skies on a luck dragon.
Right? Who wouldn't?
It's just that movie will take you through the emotional ringer, and the saddest scene is in that damn swamp, and that's it. I ain't going no further.
I'm surprised they haven't made a Funko Pop. I think they're in the process of making a Funko Pop of that. Like,
oh no,
that's the worst. Yeah.
Just no.
I have to say, I've actually never seen this movie, because around that time I was more into the more SF than the fantasy stuff. But did this movie have like young actors that became like real famous later?
I will say the one that plays Bastian, I don't think he did. I think he was in a couple things, but most of them I don't think that they did.
I don't think so either.
Why do I think that the guy from Simon and Simon is in this one? Did he play the dad?
Which one? Did he play Simon, or did he play Simon?
He may have played the dad. The original Simon and Simon.
The one that's married to Delta Burke, and I can't remember
Gerald
his name.
McRaney.
Gerald McRaney. I think Gerald McRaney played the dad in this.
Okay.
Or was
I think he did.
Or was that Daryl? The movie Daryl, which I did like too.
He was from the Bob Newhart
he
show.
was in Daryl.
No, I actually mean Daryl, like the Daryl movie.
Oh, D period, A period, R period, Y period, L period.
I did like that one.
Was this actually based on a children's book, or was this like written for?
I don't believe so. As far as I know, it wasn't. I think that this was kind of a time where they were.
I think they were trying to bridge the gap. Yeah.
Right. They were really into they did this again with The Princess Bride, where the book becomes real almost, and they're kind of living the characters. I think more so with this movie than Princess Bride, obviously, which is just him creating a story to his grandchild. But this was kind of one of those where the kid gets sucked into the book and almost feels every little issue that the characters have. And this is kind of when around the time right before, I think this was 1984, so this is right before Legend, and this can kind of continue with the 1980s, where there's this kind of a deeper meaning fantasy movies where like the nothing was just some sort of like metaphor for something that was going on in the kid's life,
right,
because the kid had to deal with bullies. So I think this is a pretty deep fantasy movie for children, to be honest. I mean, I haven't seen it. I think I watched it when my son was little, and he enjoyed it. We skipped the Neverending Story 2 because I feel like that's just a cash grab, personally. It had its moments, but I wasn't ever a fan. I thought this movie
it seems like the middle part of the decade, I would say like from maybe 1983 to about 1986 is when you really have the cluster of fantasy movies. I mean, a lot of big sci-fi movies earlier in the decade, like from 82, especially 82, and then it seemed to kind of like change into everybody was doing all the fantasy ones in that little part in the middle of the decade.
Right. It was like Return to Oz, and they had
well, that was 85, so again, there you go.
Yeah, again, 85 they loved very deep fantasy movies that were a little strange. And I always kind of felt this movie had a strange vibe to it. It's a good movie, but it had that very odd fantasy thing that they were really into, kind of like this very metaphor, very deeper, context where as you watch it, you start seeing more things. This is one of the movies you watch it and you see something different every time.
It's good.
Which is good. And it's not your typical children's movie. And I don't know if Michelle would agree with that. I feel like it's a little bit more for the more intelligent child.
Older
way.
children, or
those end up being the best ones.
Yeah. Because they don't they don't like talk down to children in it. It's very, I don't know, with the I guess it's the princess or whatever. It's very ethereal. I don't know.
Yeah.
You could probably find a lot of deeper meanings in it if you just really dig deep to it.
That princess in this picture looks to me almost like it could be, a young, Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things.
Yeah, you're talking about Bastian.
Yeah.
I've seen that guy recently. He doesn't look anything like that. He's got a long beard. He looks like an Amish guy. But sorry, it's great.
Way to destroy the illusion.
The guy that played Atreyu was all tattooed up and got a mohawk.
Yeah.
Time Mechanic has a point. The idea of a sequel to the never-ending story, no, that doesn't even make sense. If the story is never ending, then it doesn't have a sequel at all. It's the same original story that just doesn't end.
I don't know how Michelle feels about it. You might have liked it.
The sequel was okay, but this one is by far the best one.
Honestly,
I like
Garrett, if you've never seen it, you should just give it a watch just to say you've seen it, because it's one of those.
A lot of the 80s fantasy movies. Hey, you're talking to a guy who still hasn't seen Goonies, so.
I know, and that's we're going to talk about that.
But, and Goonies, I'm just throwing it out there. That is a movie that must never, ever, ever, ever be remade. Don't ever do it.
No,
Goonies
never.
has to stay.
I will fight somebody. I will be like, with the protest sign, because that movie was so much my childhood that I just can't say so much. And Josh Brolin was my total crush back then. Not so much anymore, but back then, yes, Josh Brolin was a major crush.
Well, that was a good. I'll watch.
But the never-ending story is just because I think it will take you back to the 80s and that feeling that you get from watching an 80s fantasy movie, which they cannot do. All the CGI they have now cannot capture what they captured in this film.
Right.
So it's a beautiful filmed movie. And Falcor is the cutest thing I've ever seen. I want one.
Yes.
And to me, he kind of has a cat look to him, which always made me think of a cat or a dog or something so cute. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of like, I'm surprised they didn't have toys, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they do?
No, I don't think they did.
No,
they should have.
That's odd. They would these days. They would have all these collector.
Maybe that's good that they did
these days.
Maybe it's good. Here's some facts about the movie. Noah Hathaway, who played the character Atreyu, was seriously injured on set. He was thrown off a horse and the horse stepped on him. Oh my God, that's horrible.
Wait a minute. Noah Hathaway, he played Boxy in the original Battlestar Galactica series.
Oh, okay. So maybe he did other things. Wow. I don't know. Hathaway also nearly lost an eyeball during filming. Jeez. Where are the parents? In the original novel, Atreyu is a member of the green skin race and has green colored skin. Okay, there is a novel.
Wait, was this a German movie? I can't figure out the first.
I guess so. One. The Neverending Story was the most expensive movie in Germany's history at the time of its release. Maybe it is.
Or maybe it was made in Germany.
Yeah. in the original movie, Atreyu is a member of the green skin race, and it's green color skin. So there's a novel. However, this detail was not included in the film. So there is a novel. So
probably the original.
Yeah, the original Euron prop from the film is displayed in Steven Spielberg's office. So it's a blast from the past. So if you haven't seen it, just check it out. I'm sure it's streaming somewhere.
Yeah, that's a cute little story.
Oh, here we go.
This is why I was lolling, because you're like, oh, well, next week if we haven't talked about Lady Hawk,
that's okay.
I watched this.
Lots of others. This is the one. Yeah. Yep. Go for it, Michelle.
Rutger Hauer in the movie as Etienne Navarre, the captain of the guard, or and that big black horse. Yes, Goliath. Horse is named Goliath. Yeah. This is like the perfect fantasy movie. I mean, and beautiful Michelle Pfeiffer there. I mean, they couldn't have picked anybody better to play Isabeau. And I love Matthew Broderick.
Andy, do me a favor and kind of zoom in on Michelle Pfeiffer there.
Can I zoom in her? I don't know if I can do that. I don't have like a laser pointer or anything either. Actually, I probably do, but I don't know how to access it.
I mean, she fit the character, Lady Hawk to a T. I mean, it just because the hawk is a graceful creature, and she's very graceful in this movie, and it's a love triangle, of course, and but she lost her heart to Navarre, and the bishop, having his carnal thoughts, didn't want anybody to have her.
It's a great villain.
He was also in War Games.
He played a superb villain in this, and Matthew Broderick playing Philippe, the mouse, the thief, and he escaped. I don't know if I could have the heart to escape how he did from the dungeons of Aqua.
Oh yeah,
with the latrine, escape through a latrine.
Fingers, you see.
Yeah.
Puking.
Yeah, and he meets up with Navarre and everything, and he's Navarre's telling him, okay, it's coming to be night. I need you to watch the hawk for me, and whatever happens, don't let anybody go in and see the hawk or anything. And you never knew why until you got a little more into the story, and then you found out why, and it's like, oh, okay. And
it's great how they kind of parse out how they kind of drip feed the backstory in slowly, which is way better if they would have dumped it at the beginning. Yeah. But this way, like as the characters are finding out key facts, so are we.
Yeah, this is another movie that should never. Yeah.
I watched it last night. I'd actually never seen it.
Really?
Nope, I had never seen it. And the reason why I had never seen it is because Matthew Broderick, because I felt like, and I still feel this way, I kind of felt like he was put in there because he was. Oh,
it's a good story. It's a wonderful story.
But when I realized Rutger Hauer is in it, I'm like, okay, I'm in, because Rutger Hauer does a perfect Navarre. Like, he is perfect in the role. And according to the facts that I have, Donner wanted originally Kurt Russell to play Navarre, and
You've been great. Well, no.
No.
Rutger Hauer needs to look like an actual knight with the build.
He does. He has that
the
look.
way he carries himself.
And I think he was trying to get away from his character from Blade Runner. And I think this is because he told Donner, I want to play this role. Like, I really can do this. And so Donner, okay, I believe in you. And, he was so committed that he actually, basically hauled a trailer on set and had like an RV on set. I mean, immediately he was so excited to play this role. So that kind of like, okay, Donner was like, all right, he's really committed to this role. And he did an excellent job in this. I mean, it was
he has great chemistry with Matthew Broderick and with Leo McKern, who plays the old, I want to say Friar Tuck, but it's not Friar Tuck. It's the Abbot or whatever.
Imperious?
Imperious,
the old priest,
Imperious.
The only thing, and this is not to take away from the movie, which I love, and I'm so glad that you picked it, Michelle. The only thing that I've really ever thought about Matthew Broderick in this, it's not that I think he's a bad actor or whatever. It's just, and I've seen this movie several times, it's just the way that Matthew Broderick is playing that character doesn't seem to me to fit with the time period that this movie's set in. He's not playing Ferris Bueller, which was a year in his future, but he's playing an 80s kid set in, I mean, to me, set in a, like a snarky 80s kid that happened to be stuck in a medieval movie. And I've always thought that, and it doesn't diminish the movie for me, but I always notice it.
And I thought Kevin Costner started the slipping out of the British accent thing. No, it was Matthew Broderick. He started that.
It's not even his accent. It's because Michelle Pfeiffer doesn't have the accent when she's there. I mean, she tries a little bit of the kind of English accent, but she doesn't sustain it. Well, but it's just more the way Matthew Broderick talks, the way he carries himself.
Right. Well, he tried to kind of be British at first.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, I can't. I'm just gonna forget it. And it's kind of like before Kevin Costner did it in The Prince of Thieves. But that was the reason why I never watched the movie, was because I cannot see Matthew Broderick in a period piece. So had you not suggested it, Michelle, I wouldn't have okay, I'm going to watch this. And when I realized I'd forgotten Rutger Hauer's, and I'm like, I love Rutger Hauer. I'm like, I'm going to watch this movie.
And we absolutely, of course, have to, mention the score by Dr. Evil's favorite group, the Alan Parsons Project, who did the score of this movie.
Really? They did the score?
The soundtrack
they did
is
the
amazing.
Score of this movie. I just wanted an excuse to say it, the Alan Parsons Project.
Okay. I love Alan Parsons. I did not know he.
No, at the beginning, and the titles of this are great. As the letters just kind of form there on the bottom. And I love this style.
Thinking about it really does sound like Alan Parsons now that I think about it.
I think it's a great score.
At first, it kind of took me out a little bit. I think that's because I was expecting. I was expecting more like.
I mean, it's weird to hear electric guitars on the score of a medieval movie.
That's what it is, I think. It's because I was expecting more like medieval music,
You wanted BBC Masterpiece Theater.
I think that's what I was expecting, and then I should have known it was Alan Parsons by that keyboard that was going on in it.
It's very driving. I mean, don't you think, Michelle? I mean, to me, it's a very driving score. I mean, it really is. It fits, gets you.
The score fits every scene that it was written for. You have to see it, and as you're watching it, make note of the music, because the music does drive the movie. It really does.
Again, I think it's an underrated film just because the performances by Michelle Pfeiffer and Rutger Hauer. So if you're not into Matthew Broderick in a period piece, don't let that stop you. I did for many, many years. That's why I didn't watch it. So don't let it stop you because Rutger Hauer's in it. Michelle.
Matthew, if you're watching, we're sorry.
You know what? I think he learned, because he never did another period piece since after that, I don't believe. So he learned.
Nothing that was said in medieval times, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. It seemed very odd, but it's still a good film.
And because Rutger Hauer's in this one, I think the movie that I'm thinking of that he's in is called Blind Fury. I think it's a 90s movie where he plays a blind drifter, and he ends up helping a kid, but yet he's been all over the world, and he actually has skills with a sword. So, and it's not, much after this, but that's a great movie. I do too. I could
watch Rutger Hauer read the phone books.
And whatever you have to say about Matthew Broderick, you got to give the guy points for being willing to film a scene where he is struggling with a wolf trying to get out of that water.
Yeah.
Yes. That was a very good scene. Yes, it was. It was. There's scenes where I didn't mind him so bad, and then there was other scenes where I'm just like, oh, okay.
But overall, I just thought, these two, I don't know. I mean, I think he was, I think it's a great movie. I think that, this is one of these rare movies. I think I would probably give 9.5 out of 10, maybe even 10 out of 10. It's great. I can't think of anything, even with Matthew Broderick, I can't think of anything.
And just to note, if you didn't know, and the guy that played Imperius also played a version of number 2 on The Prisoner.
The Prisoner. That's right.
So
Do we have facts
I
about this
recognize
one?
that voice immediately. It's like, I just.
Do we have
it
facts
sounded
about
like,
this one?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Walk
see.
on the left side.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I sure do.
I did not know about Kurt Russell, and he was my favorite actor when I was a kid. So, but
I love Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell. I loved him. I love him, but he's wrong for this film. Period.
Yeah.
I'm glad he
I
dropped
agree.
out. And I'm going to be buying this movie because I quite enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, no, I have it. Yeah, it's great. Michelle,
I
I'm
have
sure
it.
has it. It's great. Yeah.
I have it. Yes.
And it actually received positive reviews from critics.
And even the guy, who was the guy who, I can't think of the name, who played the evil bishop, but he was fantastic. And even the guy
John
who was
Wood.
John Wood. And
Yeah.
even the guy
He was
who
in
was
War
his
Games.
kind of like his lieutenant, the captain of the guard,
Mhm.
he was scummy too. He was great.
Oh yeah, I was so glad he died. It was like, oh yes, But then
Spoiler.
the last scene was awesome.
Oh, the way
Yes.
that they deal with John Wood in this movie is great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is great.
Yes, definitely going to be on my to buy list.
Yeah.
Putting that on the list. So it's
Kurt Russell
it
was
makes
good
me
as Elvis.
wonder-
Kurt Russell was very good. The Facebook user, hello to you on Facebook. Yeah, Kurt Russell in 1980.
I think-
a John Carpenter movie, by the way, Andy.
Big Trouble in Little China.
No.
Escape from New York.
Yes, but I mean, he did the Elvis TV, the 3-hour Elvis TV movie in 1980, directed by John Carpenter, and Kurt Russell was great as Elvis
better than Austin, whatever his name is. I think that's just a wrong. This guy, young kid playing in the new Elvis movie. His name is Austin something or another. And he's okay. I think he's overrated. I do remember that movie. I actually do.
So, Michelle, thank you very, very much for picking this.
Oh,
All right.
I figured you might pick it, but I love
he was
that movie.
he was going to. I know he was
So
he was going to next week anyway.
Dungeons and Dragons. I never have seen this.
Wow,
that's the animated series.
Oh, boy.
It was this Saturday
great
morning?
cartoon.
Yes, Saturday morning cartoons. We would, made by TSR and Marvel Productions. It's co-production with Marvel and TSR and Japanese TOEI animation.
Yeah, they did a lot of the Rankin Bass animation in the 60s.
Yeah, you got these 6 friends, and they go to this carnival, and it's like a roller coaster ride, and it ends up taking them to another realm, and they become these characters in Dungeons and Dragons, and that just helped fuel the fire for us in the 80s that actually played that game. And they go through and they have a dungeon master, and they're trying to get back home, and I don't know if they ever made it home. It's been so long since I've seen the series.
I don't
think
remember
there's like
either,
27 episodes. Yeah.
I think I don't know. I haven't looked on YouTube, but I thought
a lot of these
it was
cartoon
some of
series
YouTube.
never did like finales because they wanted the show to run forever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So was this based on the actual like Dungeons and Dragons, the table game? Like
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It they based on TSR's Dungeons and Dragons role playing game.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because that came out first, and then this. And I remember as a kid, we were all excited. We'd sit glued to our TVs in the morning. I think it came on at like 8 or 8:30 in the mornings, and we'd go into school on Monday and talk about, hey, did you see? Yeah, and I think the series was brilliant.
It too. I loved it too.
I always wanted to go on a roller coaster, and it actually happened like that. And every time I get off, it's like, damn, still here.
She's like, what a ripoff.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
I always thought the Dungeon Master, my teenage brother that would always watch TV with me, he would always thought the Dungeon Master looked like, Ozzy. It's Ozzy Osbourne.
Was it like a thing that they got brought there because like the land is in a time of crisis or something, and the guy needs them to help or something? Is that what?
Yeah, I guess kind of in a way they would go and help those in need or fight off whatever monsters, because there was an evil presence there, and his name was Venger, and he would try to, conquer everything. And you've got the blonde-haired guy there. His name is Hank. He's a ranger. You got Eric, and he's, I believe, like a cleric or the cavalier. You've got a magician.
Yeah.
You got a barbarian, which is the little kid, with his little unicorn. And
I remember the dark-haired kid was like he was like a tool. He was like a douchebag. He was kind of a douche.
Yeah.
Facebook user has a question for you, Michelle, about the characters.
Yes. The Cowardly Knight. Yeah, that was Eric. That was Eric. Yeah, he was the one that always would want to run from a fight, but yet he would do whatever he needed to do, but not like the Ranger would.
There's a current show that I saw an ad for. It's like a streaming show or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's based on a comic series, whatever, but it's almost the same thing, and it's like current. It's going on now. Do you know the name?
What's it? Dungeons and Dragons, the movie?
No, it's not called Dungeons and Dragons. It's very similar to where these 6 characters get called on to go and do. I can't think of the name of it. I saw an ad for it, it was like a streaming show like a few months ago, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But
I can imagine the kids from Stranger Things are probably watching this show.
Well,
oh yeah,
yeah.
Definitely.
I'm sure they were like, this is what they were watching on Saturday morning, like, Dustin and Mike and all of them.
Of course. Well, Peter Cullen, he voices Venger, and he's the same one that does I think Optimus Prime, from the Transformers and everything. And I thought that was pretty cool. Of course, they had that's where we found Tiamat, the 5-headed dragon, and that now they have that in a Funko Pop last year, and I was trying to get it, and it's like, man, but of course it quickly went away. So that's a collector's item now.
They actually need to do more Funko Pops in the actual like Dungeons and Dragons universe. Rather than relying on a movie or something, just make a character that's like from the cards. And because that's a whole other I just feel like Funko fails a lot because they base it on some kind of current movie when they need to base this on like a fandom that it's like as old as Dungeons and Dragons is.
Was that recent Chris Pine movie based on this?
I would assume it's probably nothing like it.
Nothing like this. I tried to watch that. I couldn't get into it. And I don't know why. It just I'd rather go back and watch
because it looks hokey and it doesn't take the source material serious from what I can see from the trailer. In my opinion, I have no interest in watching it. It looks miscast to me. I
remember also with this Dungeons and Dragons TV series, there was Dungeons and Dragons Choose Your Own Adventure novels, and we used to eat those up because we could actually play the game, but in book form and not have to depend on anybody.
Those are fun books.
Doctor Who had a few of those during the Colin Baker era.
Yeah. I love Choose Your Own Adventure books. I read a lot of those with my kids when they were little. And Facebook user says the twist of who Venger is. I'm not going to say. So you need to watch the series. It's good. It's really good series, especially if you like Dungeons and Dragons.
So the show ran on CBS from 1983 through 1985 for 3 seasons for a total of 27 episodes. Yeah, I figured it was. I remember it was being on CBS. The show is a cult following and is still popular among fans of the game. The show's opening theme song is considered iconic and still remembered by many fans. It had a very cool intro. I remember that's kind of what made me want to watch the show because it had a cool premise. And I was too young to play the game at that point anyway. The show was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program in 1995. So
most like the Saturday morning cartoons in the 70s and the 80s, you think of 2 seasons. That's going to have 3 seasons. That's going to have a lot. normally like cartoon seasons were maybe like 15 or 16 episodes.
Yeah.
And then if they were really super popular like this, and they got picked up for a second season, it would be for like maybe like 12 or 13 more episodes. And then they would repeat it. They could have like a season. It was nothing but repeats. So a lot of times, I mean, shows like this, you think lasted a really long time. Wow, that must have tons of episodes, and a lot less than you think. But that was true of most Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah, that's kind of sad in a way. I wish there was more. I probably have literally seen every original Scooby-Doo episode, and I think most kids that watched it on a regular basis probably had to.
Yeah.
But you always think that there's more that you've missed, but you probably haven't. If you're an avid watcher, you know.
Yeah.
I've probably seen every episode of this too, but you know, I'm always thinking there's got to be more that I missed.
It says this was one of the earliest on-screen adaptations of D&D in the middle.
Yeah, as far as I can remember, yeah. So it's a good little series. Fits right alongside the game.
All right, on to the next one. I'm glad you picked this one. Yeah, I'm glad
I was talking with Tracy about this one and then Cocoon: The Return. They both really go together because they're both great movies. Yeah. I like the idea of, you know, living like in an assisted living facility and, you know, the pool closed off. Well, why is the pool closed off? Let's go sneak in, you know, and they go and they sneak into the pool and there's these pods there and, you know, they just swim anyway. And then things start to happen and they're able to do things that they couldn't do before, you know, and I find that really fascinating. And I have a heart for the elderly anyway. So, I mean, it would be great if a lot of the elderly and those of us that feel that way, you know, joint wise and, you know, all other musculoskeletal issues, you know, could go and dip in that pool and get a lot better. But Steve Guttenberg in there, Wilford Brimley, I love the whole story of, you know, you have these aliens that they've got their pods here on Earth and scientists, you know, have stumbled across them and they're trying to study them and figure out what's what. And it's the elderly guys that come across it and they reap the benefits and then they bring their wives in. And it's just, it's such a good story, a good-hearted, clean sci-fi film, you know?
Yeah, it really
with a little element of fantasy.
Heartwarming. Yeah, it's heartwarming too. And they don't realize that they're actually taking the life of the alien. They're not,
right.
You know what I mean? They're just like swimming and they just notice, hey, I feel better. I can dance. I mean, you know, I can dance more. I can, you know, I want to be with my wife more and all these don't question it until Charles Durning comes in and says that, hey, you know, you're actually sucking the life of these creatures. And of course, immediately they feel horrible about it.
Right.
But this DVD is very hard to find, by the way.
Really?
Yes, it is actually. It's very expensive because they only made so many of them. And they haven't done another release in years. So good luck finding it
Blu-ray.
under $100.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think we have them both. Yeah. I think we have them where both movies are on one disc or something like that. Yeah, they're floating around here somewhere.
Yeah, you're lucky because it's almost impossible to find now.
Am I bad for admitting that the first thing that I think of when I think of this movie is Tawny Welch?
Yes, but that's okay. We'll let you we'll let you live.
That's the one thing I remember most about this. And I remember this was a great one because it was a very unique premise as well. It wasn't you know, I remember thinking that I'd only seen Cocoon 2 once. I remember thinking, and it's been like decades, forever since I've seen it. But I just remember thinking at the time that it was really unnecessary. That basically everything that was said about this very clever premise that they'd done at this first one. And the second one, to me, just kind of diminished it. because it's like they come back and it's
I could see it, but I think the saddest part for me in the original is how they had to leave their family. Because
I thought they all went together.
They did, but no, their family, like the grandkids, and you know what I mean. And I think on that level, I would, as somebody that was a kid, and if my grandparent left, I would miss them. So I think at that level, I wanted to see them come back and see their family because. It just seemed weird that your grandparents are just leaving you to go to another planet. I thought, while the second movie is not as good as the first movie, like I always will prefer Cocoon over Cocoon.
Well, but see, think about it on the positive side, maybe it would cause those grandkids to do some necessary kind of self-reflection. It's like, why would my grandparent want to move to another planet instead of stay with me?
Right.
Then it's like, look at yourself then. Maybe you're the problem.
Yeah.
Years of trauma and therapy in their future. But you want to feel really old? Wilford Brimley was 50 years old when he made this film.
Jeez.
50.
Wow.
That's before he started selling. What was that thing he used to sell?
Diabetes.
Diabetes stuff,
Wasn't it like a breakfast cereal or something? That.
Yeah, that too. But I always think of diabetes.
Yeah,
that's what I
diabetes.
think of.
Did he sell oatmeal or something?
Well.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, Quaker Oats.
Quaker Oats,
yeah.
But
hey,
Don
I
Amici
love my
is
oatmeal
amazing in this film too. I mean,
that's what I had this morning too. So, Don Amici was great in this. Even Steve Guttenberg was tolerable in this.
Yeah, they were all good.
Yeah.
And Ron Howard is an amazing.
Oh, that's
director.
right. It was Ron Howard. Okay.
Yeah. So when Ron Howard is still making good movies.
Yeah.
He wasn't making Hillbilly Elegy.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he actually made a film called Hillbilly Elegy with Amy Adams and Glenn Close.
Is that related to that Hillbilly movie that we watched on the B movie?
No. This is better,
okay.
but only by slightly. Yes, it was panned on Netflix. It was a Netflix original film, I believe, and it was panned.
Wow.
But it's basically Amy Adams and Glenn Close looking like, she's 105 years old, and they live in a trailer park, and it's trailer park drama. So yeah, that's what he's gone from Cocoon to Hillbilly Elegy.
Did you see Wynn put up a
Wynn's comment? Yeah, I yes, certain parts do make you cry. Yes,
it does. It really does. And the thing that what I thought was a very humorous part was I don't remember which was it Don Amici's wife in the film becomes pregnant, which is hilarious.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
but one of my favorite scenes in this movie is probably cringy to a lot of people, but it was when they're in the club and the Michael Cimbello song Gravity is playing, and like they're showing young people how it's done, and I love that
the
scene.
dance.
They're dancing. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I can't remember if it's I can't remember if it's in this one or the Return where they're playing basketball and they show up all the younger kids in a basketball game.
I love it when old folks show up younger like whippersnappers, honestly.
Yes.
I've always loved it. I think it's like an awesome thing. And it's a great film.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's definitely a cool film. If you can find it streaming anywhere, which I can't. So good luck.
That's odd. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I've looked because I love this film, and it's good luck finding one that's under. I hope they re-release it. I hope they do maybe like a 4K or something.
Don't remake it.
Put it on streaming.
Re-release it.
Yeah, just re-release it. No, don't remake this film.
Oh, that's right. Brian Dennehy was the leader of the aliens.
Yeah, it's not Charles Durney. Yeah. Brian Dennehy. What was I thinking? I always get Charles Durney and Brian Dennehy.
Yeah, okay. I when I see the cast list now, I was like, oh, that's right. She was in it. Oh, yeah, she was in it. Okay.
Brian Dennehy, not Charles
and
Durney.
Linda Harrison was one of the daughters, I think. Was one like the grown daughter of one of them. Yeah.
Jessica Tandy, as well as Hume Cronin. They were married,
in real life. Yeah.
Maureen Stapleton was
That was
the
good.
wife of.
It was a really good ensemble. I mean, Ron Howard had a knack for putting together a really good ensemble cast in his film.
Yeah, he did. Not anymore, but but he did. Like most directors, they just really
Ron, if you're listening, I really enjoyed
do better.
I really enjoyed Grand Theft Auto.
But do better. Do better. So we're down to the 1983 miniseries, and I wasn't sure if you were talking about the TV series because I know there was one after this, but I just left it.
Oh no, the 1980s one, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That was our middle school / high school. Yes. Loved it. The visitors come and everybody thinks, oh, the aliens are here. They're friendly. They're going to help us, blah, 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 blah. Until they finally sneak in and some of the suspicious people are like, I don't trust that. There's something else going on. And
yeah, I love that about the show.
Yeah. And you find out that they're like lizard people in disguise and you see them eating mice and things like that. And they build up there's a resistance. And what I found strangely interesting, and I just now thought about it, the leader of the visitors, when they come down and he sets up in that mansion house and he's got the red flags with their symbol on it, and it makes me think immediately of Nazi Germany.
Well, that was the allegory. That Kenneth Johnson, Kenneth Johnson, who created this for the V, and then the next miniseries V, The Final Battle. Those are the only two that he did. He didn't do the weekly series after that. But yeah, it was clearly, you're right, Michelle. Yeah, clearly modeled after the National Socialist movement.
And Mark Singer as the journalist / resistance fighter, and him from his Beastmaster days. I loved his character and loved how he fought, and he was with the scientist Julie, who came up with the idea of the red dust, which actually can help fight them off. And then Michael Ironside is in this, and he's like one of the enforcers for the resistance. It's just a really good series, and we would always hypothetically in school talk about, well, I know what I'd do if this happened, and I know what I'd do if this happened. And it just kept going on. And we lived for that series every week. And I think it came on like Friday nights. And it was,
that was the series. I think, that was the TV series. I missed that one. Both of the miniseries, I think, were 2 4-hour miniseries of V and V, The Final Battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I still remember
I think Robert Englund's first roles, right?
Yes.
It is. He's in there. It's like, oh, look, Freddy Krueger,
Because this was 1983, and so this would have been before Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
And Jane Badler, I can't remember, what was her name? Was it Diana? Who was the villain, the villainess in the bottom?
Diana, yeah.
She was great.
Yeah, and they would store people and eat them later. It's like, ew. It's a good series. It makes you
really
wonder.
It.
I loved it. I think I have all of them. They're out there on the shelf now. Just haven't watched it in a long time.
Was Lydia the blonde?
Yeah, they tried to remake it, but
Grand Moff Miranda says I was Lydia fan. Was Lydia the blonde? I didn't watch too much of
I
the
think
series.
she was.
I think she was in the series, not the TV movies.
Yeah,
right?
I think she stood opposite Diana. She would go toe to toe with her. Wouldn't take any of Diana's crap. But yeah, I remember her, and I remember the little girl. And Prete Nama, which means I want to say peace or something. Yeah, Star Child. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So yeah, I love that series. I need to go back and watch it again because there's nothing else to watch on TV now. I know they tried to do a remake.
So basically, like thanks to Kenneth Johnson, dude, for creating so much of the great
another
stuff
one.
from the 70s and 80s, because
Yeah,
your name is
one.
all over this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he was an amazing creator. I mean, he really did. He made television worth watching in the 80s, for sure, in the 70s and 80s. And why they ever try to remake it, I don't know. I never watched the original. I mean, I
that's
never
right.
watched
They did a
the
remake
season.
with the actress from Firefly, right? I never watched that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't want to watch it. I thought it looked stupid, and it didn't last either. So other people thought that too. It's one of those things that you just shouldn't. They try to make it all flashy, and just don't do that. So yeah, it was. I was in love with Mark Singer, so I was
Yes.
in front of the television set every week.
Yeah.
And then Faye Grant, who was his other resistance leader, she was one of the students on Greatest American Hero.
Yeah, she was
before this.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot of messages from Sarah, and I'm totally jealous because she's just met Paul McGann.
Oh,
yeah, oh my
gosh!
And he gave her chocolates.
Oh, wow!
I met Paul McGann too at Gallifrey a few years ago. Yeah. So yay!
And then she's met Adric, and she's met Sophie Aldred. So that's cool.
They did have a video of them meeting Sophie Aldred this morning at the Who thing, but
I'm totally jealous. She got chocolates from
Marina
Paul
Bacall.
McGann.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway, that's the update. That's my.
I heard that on this new V, though. I didn't watch the new V show. That
no.
They seem to focus a lot on the whole them as lizards eating stuff.
Yeah, I've only seen bits and pieces of the new series,
I just wasn't interested.
I'm uncertain.
It looked boring to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Marina Baccarin in it, and that was
she was. I can't remember her character on Firefly, but she was in Firefly.
And she also played in Deadpool too.
I mean, it just shows you that for these concepts, whether it's Quantum Leap or whether it's V or whatever, it's not just having an interesting concept. You've got to have a guy running it that actually has a vision. In this case, Kenneth Johnson, with what he wanted to talk about Nazism. You have to have a guy with a vision. You have to have the right actors to do it. And you have to actually have, a writing team that stays focused on the point you're trying to make. All of these, new versions, whether it's, V or Quantum Leap or whatever, that they're just saying, oh, here's an idea. It's like, no, you can't just sustain on the idea. You've got to have the talent to make that idea happen in order for it to be good. It's not just the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, and she played Inara. Agree. The character in Firefly was Inara.
That was it. Inara.
Yeah. And Martin, Grand Moff, or Miranda mentioned Martin. Yeah, Martin was the good guy in V. And I always liked his character too.
I remember I remember only watching a couple of episodes of the weekly series because I tuned in to a couple episodes of the weekly series, and it seemed like because now they were making it a series that it became it felt like it was becoming a lot more soap opera. They introduced like a dozen new characters with all their own relationships, and they were trying to make almost like a science fiction version of Dynasty or Dallas or something.
Yeah, it's a soap opera, and I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But
I admit I didn't watch the whole thing of the series, just the minis.
I watched some of the series, but I think it was the original miniseries was amazing. Another one we should go back and rewatch to see what we think of it now. Be cool.
Yeah, because since we can't get any more dark matter, gee.
Yeah, right. I would actually trust Joseph if he remade V. I would trust he would do it right. But there's a lot of people that just don't know how to do sci-fi these days at all.
Right.
And that's the big problem. They want to make a big soap opera out of it. And you can have a little element of that, but just not the whole focus, which why I'm
Right.
enjoying Stargate Atlantis. There's no like characters so far. They're falling in love with each other. It's just, how do we get out of this situation? Nobody has time for that. So
Exactly, because they got the wraith breathing down their neck. Yeah.
right.
So, yeah.
So there you go. That's how you do.
Well, you
current
can talk to
sci-fi,
me,
they do it
message
that
me
way.
anytime about Stargate Atlantis.
Yeah, I've been doing that a little bit, but yeah, I'm pretty deep in. So now we'll do a stream about that soon.
Oh,
Okay,
gosh.
so we're now
Yeah.
down to the leftovers, which none of these are really leftovers in my opinion, but some of them are mixed in with ones that I feel like are underrated or maybe people have forgotten about. But nobody mentioned this movie. So here it is.
Yeah, it's on my
Don't know if
honorable
you've heard
mention
about this
list.
one. Don't know if you've heard of this movie. If you haven't, what planet have you been on?
Under my little name icon, you can tell that I remember this movie because if you look at the little white part under my name, RetroDoc, it says out of time. So that's why.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah,
You
I
did.
noticed that. Yeah.
So you failed because you didn't put this on your list, but it's okay. I got you covered. So
I didn't
anyway.
put Wrath of Khan on my list either, but
I know the reason because you tried to trick me.
That was not a trick.
Because you're like, all right, no, because we were here all day talking about Star Trek.
Well,
Which
see,
is fine.
Gary, I didn't put The Next Generation on my list because I figured you'd have it on yours.
Well, no, here's the thing. When we talk to the 90s, obviously that crosses decades. So I'm sure we'll talk about that in the 90s. But the two actual seasons of Next Gen that actually aired during the 1980s, for the most part, stunk. So that's we'll talk about that in the 90s for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, no, this was, who doesn't like Back to the Future? I mean, this is probably the best. I mean, the way that their consistent rules about time travel is great. I mean, I think this whole trilogy is great.
I adored this movie and I still adore this movie. I've seen it so many times now. It's just, it's really ridiculous. I mean, I can't even count how many times I've seen this movie, probably more than The Wizard of Oz, which I've seen a lot. There was a point where I did watch this movie every day when I got the VHS copy that cost $99. Because back in the 80s when VHS first came out, they were very expensive.
Yeah,
they were.
So this is one of the very first actual movies on VHS that I owned, and I took advantage of it. I wore it out every day for like 3 years. How much do you watch a movie that? But I could because I don't know, it resonated. Killer soundtrack. Christopher Lloyd is amazing in this film. What can you say?
And they really had no idea about whether it was going to be successful or not right up to the moment of release. It's only when they started doing the previews and the initial screenings that everybody
I
went
think
crazy
it was more
over.
It was kind of a sleeper hit because I think that it just kind of like it exploded once it released because people saw the movie and realized it wasn't a hokey. I mean, because it could have gone the other way if you had the wrong casting. And we saw that with the Eric Stoltz.
Oh yeah.
Footage that's been out. I like Eric Stoltz. He was just wrong for Marty McFly. No one else could have played this role except Michael J. Fox. It wouldn't have worked.
Right.
The only thing to me that keeps the whole trilogy from being absolutely seamless is unfortunately the actress, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name right now, who played Jennifer, his girlfriend. Claudia Wells was not available to do in 4 years later when they did filmed 2 and 3 back to back. So they got Elizabeth Shue. Elizabeth Shue is a terrific actress. I mean, Adventures in Babysitting is one of my iconic movies, but Claudia Wells was better in that role.
And the reason she could not come back is her mom had cancer and she chose, which is very admirable.
Of course. No. I mean, I know that it was, but I mean that, because you can watch these 3 movies back to back to back, and it's basically one movie, kind of like the Lord of the Rings thing. The only thing is that the actress from Jennifer switches. Everything else, though, is like you can watch it as one big, long 6-hour movie.
Right. And I'm really glad that they chose. I mean, obviously, in the 80s, it would be nothing but the 50s because it was, now it's like if they'd made Back to the Future, it'd be the 90s, which is really, that's frightening to me. Because he'd want to go back to the 90s. I don't know. But right now, actually, the 90s sound real good, actually. But I like that the 50s. My mom was a teenager in the 50s, and so this was a favorite of hers as well. I could relate because having a mom that seems so perfect, and then going back and realizing, oh, mom isn't so perfect, was cool.
And even the town is a character in the movie. We see the town and all the different.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, from the dog to to just the opening scene where you see him like going in and blowing out this huge like guitar speaker, just from all those scenes and my favorite scene, I have the Funko Pop, is where he dresses up in the hazmat suit. He goes and he, visits his dad and says, I am, Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, and I'm going to melt your brain. Basically, if you don't ask my mother out, which is basically what the whole thing was. And it was just like, and just the whole Edward Van Halen tape, all of it was just so perfect. And again, I mean, you have Biff, who cannot deliver a line that's to save himself, be a tree and get out of here instead of leave. I mean, he's so
I still say that to people sometimes.
Yeah.
Speak like
a tree and get out of here.
Yeah.
But it's just a fun movie in the scene with the Johnny Be Good. I mean, there's just so many wonderful scenes that,
and a great score by Alan Silvestri of the music, Back to the Future music.
Yes.
And Huey Lewis in the News, because that was popular,
You're just too loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, coming from Huey Lewis. But I love it. It's like it's something about it. It's become a classic, and a classic that my son's watched and loved, and I'm sure when his son or daughter comes along, we'll be watching it. And so
I think if you had to pick one, if you could only pick one iconic 1980s movie, you can absolutely make a case for this one.
Oh, absolutely. It defined a generation. It really did. It almost defined a generation to where it's just a part of the 80s so much that and so just beautifully written and beautifully filmed, and again, perfect casting. And you just Back to the Future 2 was good, but you take out Crispin Glover and Leah Thompson. I mean, we had Leah Thompson in it, but Leah Thompson, like Leah Thompson, and you take out Claudia Wells, and just what works is just it kind of
the second one gets a lot of flack, but I think it's actually, I think the only thing about the second one that I still think is a questionable decision was the questionable decision to have Michael J. Fox play his own daughter. I get playing his own son, but even in the trailer, him coming down the stairs and going, "Who is it?" That is like, I don't know what they were smoking when they did that. But the reason I love the second movie, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, is I think it has a better explanation for time travel anomalies than any movie I've ever seen. The fact that he actually gets a blackboard. When Marty says, "Why don't we just go back and fix it?" And he goes, "Because we've branched off into this branch here, and if we go back now, it'll be from this branch. So we've got to go back before and stop it." I thought visually that is a perfect way. That was the perfect way to explain time travel, like to the normies who aren't immersed in time travel stuff all the time. I thought visually, that was just a perfect way to do it.
And Elizabeth Nightbridge, I want to touch on this. Love the bit when the car arrives in the heavy rain and it's a lawyer delivering a letter to Marty that's been entrusted with like 80 years earlier. Great writing. And the reason why I think this movie is such ingrained in our pop culture is that in many shows, including Supernatural, they have references to Back to the Future, and many other TV series is they always pay homage to those scenes. A scene like this, or a scene in the restaurant where Marty sees his dad, Supernatural did that too. And I think that it's become it's a part of us now. Yeah. Back to the Future is just part of us. It's a part of Americana. And that's what I love about it. Like, let's put the American flag out here, but it really is. It's just a part of us now.
Well, it's even.
Go ahead, Michelle. I'm sorry.
It's even mentioned in Stargate Atlantis because there's a line that McKay says, and he's like, "Oh, don't even get me started on that movie." You know, so yeah, I mean,
right.
There,
it's just
everywhere.
it's just been a part of our social conscious. It's
Right.
it's so referenced so many places that it's so beloved. You know,
I rewatched these a few months ago. And I got to tell you, when I was rewatching the first one, the one scene that made me feel I was like watching something on an alien planet was when he gets back in the 50s and he's wandering around the town square, and he sees the gas station where somebody pulls in and these 4 guys come out and start servicing the car. Right. I thought that's another planet.
It is. It is. And I remember very young that my mom, you know, it wasn't very much longer when I got older, they stopped doing that. But we'd pull up to a gas station. I remember mom's like, you know, fill her up unleaded, you know, regular unleaded. And I was like, you know, and then they would come out, but you can't find a gas station that will do that for you anymore. They're gone.
They would just point to the self-service sign.
Yeah. No, now I think there's maybe 1 or 2 left, but I want to say they're in the state of Washington.
Yeah. I think we had one.
There are very few.
I think we had one for the longest time. And I think that if you go to a car wash and they have a gas pump, they'll do it there.
Yeah, but that's true. That's true.
But other than that, it's not like something, and I think that that's kind of sad in a way, you know. It's like, and then you would tip the gas guy, you know. Yeah, it was like another world.
They would fill your car. And they would check your oil, and they would clean your windshields and everything.
Yeah.
So I remember that. Yes.
Yeah.
And can we? And I want to give an addition. I want to make sure to call out the writers and producers, Robert Zemeckis, Bob Gale, who basically have said that as long as they're alive, it's in their contract that this cannot be remade or rebooted.
Oh, yeah, thank God.
So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for sparing us that horror.
Thank you. There's some facts here, but I think we've pretty much touched pretty much all of these. And if you've seen the movie enough, you probably know a lot of these. But basically, I did think the DeLorean time machine became an iconic symbol of the movie, but it wasn't always the plan. The time machine was originally going to be a refrigerator. God, I'm glad they didn't do that. But the filmmakers were concerned that children would climb into the refrigerators and get trapped, so they changed it to a car. Good call.
Wise choice.
Well, think about when Indiana Jones did that.
Yeah, I was going to say
it's a joke now. It's a meme. It becomes a joke.
So it wasn't a time machine, but still, it was like, no, that's not a good thing to do in a movie because kids will crawl. Not that any kids would want to see at the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because it was horrible, but
no.
Oh, I don't like that one. No,
I don't think anybody does. Okay,
that's a good choice. Okay,
so the next one is a personal favorite of mine that basically defined my teenage years because of you know who.
What she means, everybody, is that the guy on the left is a personal favorite of hers.
Jason Patrick. I love this movie. This movie has a cool, and again, we did a script read of this.
We did
a while ago, and this is such a fun movie to me. This is like it's a good vampire flick that has a awesome soundtrack. They knew how to like do soundtracks back in the 80s.
Yep.
Just a show about this family that moves to a California seaside town that is infested with vampires, and they move in with their mom, and of course Jason Patrick Michael gets infatuated with a girl named Star, and it all goes to shit, which is generally how life is. A guy gets involved with a girl and everything goes to hell. So
can I take a second to applaud Andy's self-restraint and only putting up 2 Jason Patrick pictures?
I do like Kiefer Sutherland in this film too. So what
about the Coreys?
The Coreys are all right, but to me, it was just like you put them in there for just jokes and hijinks. I mean, they were kind of put in for comedic effect, which I get, but that's not the part of the show that I actually like. I like the fact that he's gets tricked into being this thing, And you know, his mom is obviously slowly getting involved with this man. No spoilers, but Edward Herrmann is a very interesting role in this movie, which was comical at the time, but I still think it's very effective. And I just love the fact that a lot of it takes place at a carnival, which is very dark. And it's one of the better Joel Schumacher films, because Joel Schumacher's like, it's either good or it's horrible. And I think Joel Schumacher actually did Showgirls too, as far as I remember, which was horrible. But, you know, when he gets it right, he gets it right. A lot of 80s aesthetic. You got Jamie Gertz, who's got incredible hair.
Absolutely. It's totally 80s.
You got Kiefer Sutherland with rocking the mullet, you know, and he's cool. And there's motorcycles and just, you got a cool soundtrack.
This was his first big movie, right? I mean, I know that he was in...
he was in other movies, but as far as like this kind of like put him and Jason Patrick on the map.
Yeah.
Who actually Jason Patrick, and you know, was Jackie Gleason's grandson.
I did not know that.
Also Jason Miller, who played the priest in The Exorcist. That's his father. So yeah. So he looks nothing like Jackie Gleason. He said he never had a relationship with him. So but yeah, so he's from a very you know, and it was really, really sad because I really felt like Jason Patrick would have taken off more than he did, but he did Speed 2, and that kind of derailed his career for a long time.
Speed,
but yeah, I love this
use the full title, Speed 2, Cruise Control.
Yeah, horrible movie. Don't go see it. But The Lost Boys, The Lost Boys is just epitome of a good vampire show. That's not. I mean, there's some goriness to it, but it's not like a gore fest. It's just
there's some good jump scares in it.
Yeah, and it's good, and it's got, like I said, it's got like a mood, you know. And of course, you know, he gets turned, and it's just about him, you know, of having to fight off these urges, and you know, protect his family from this gang of vampires. But it's more than that. It's just got an atmosphere that movies are lacking now.
It's kind of like, and I don't want to reduce this when I say this. It's almost kind of like an MTV feel.
But it was a cool MTV though.
Yeah.
So what was you gonna say, Michelle?
I like the twist with the mother. His mother's dating somebody, and it's interesting.
No spoilers.
Yeah.
No spoilers.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a great watch, and I'm sure other people have said a lot about it. It's a pretty well-known movie. If you haven't heard of it, you know, you're probably way younger than me, but it was definitely a good sleepover watch. When I had my friends over, it'd be like, what are you going to watch? We're going to watch The Lost Boys. Again, the soundtrack was good. Again, they knew how to
took Andy and her friends 4 hours to watch because she was always freeze framing on the pictures of Jason.
You're not, it's not a lie. It really isn't. Especially the part where he falls on the bed.
She's like, go back.
I know exactly the second that when that happens in the movie. It's like, okay, it's time to pause it. So, and the grandfather, Bernard Hughes playing the grandfather was awesome. Especially at the end when he knew that. He's like, yeah, you know what I hate about God, what's the name of the town? Anyway, he said all the damn vampires, so he already knew. And
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara. Right.
Yeah.
See, like, I live not far from there. I actually live not far from there.
Recently watched
that boardwalk was real, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Yeah. The scenes were like in the caves. That's really exists, but it's all closed off now. There was a guy that I watch on YouTube that he goes to these movie sites, and I watched the one about the Lost Boys, and it was so cool because it actually shows the cliff where the Frog Brothers, and you know, they were taking them to they were taking them with them to try to kill the vampires. They actually show that, and it's all that's very real. But you know, some of the scenes in the cave, they, you know, obviously they have it closed off, and some of that was a set. So, but it's very interesting. I like watching those, and they showed their house, you know, the grandfather's house, and it's, you know, it was a set basically. Yeah. But it's still there, so I think that was very interesting that they still left it there.
I mean, it was a cool concept, well done.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And it kind of stood the test of time, and it's a show that my son's friends watch, and it's it has staying power, which is not something you can say.
And then there's Bill, or is it Ted, who's in the lower
Bill
box.
Yeah.
Bill.
He was the one that bites it first.
But
the little one first.
Yeah.
Spoilers. But definitely cool. And I do have the Blu-ray. I'm very proud of the price I got for that one. But I'm just tell everybody, yeah, I got it at Walmart for $5. Blu-ray. I got it a couple years ago. Yeah, it is actually good, but I wouldn't mind getting on 4K now. Just getting some extras with the movie. Yeah. And they made sequels, but don't bother.
Yeah, don't.
So the movie soundtrack features several popular songs at the time, including Cry Little Sister by Gerald McMahon, which is a great song. The movie's balance between hilarious and horrifying struck a chord with audiences of young and old, and continued to in the years since it was released. My mom loved this movie, actually, because it was entertaining. It wasn't. They kind of offset the gore and the scary parts with comedy. The town of Santa Carla. It's Carla, not Clara. I thought that too. I'm thinking of Santa Clarita Diet. Santa Carla was the movie takes place, does not exist. The Lost Boys were among the first vampire movies to use extensive special makeup effects to represent the transformation from human to vampire, and they did a great job. Again, watch it. It's cool. It's not, there's some cringy parts, Edward Herrmann, but I remember laughing out loud at that part because it looks so ridiculous.
I'm actually surprised this is considered a horror comedy film. I would not have thought. To me, it's a horror film.
Oh my God, yeah, because it's just like the scenes with Corey Haim when comedy. Jason Packer's flying outside the window. When he's got all the garlic and he gets in bed with his mom, she's like, "What's that smell?"
But see, you can have humor in it, but when I think of horror comedy, I think of like the George Hamilton, like Love at First Bite or whatever.
Right now, yeah, but this has got. I think that it's because it had so much humor, and there were some horror movies back in the 80s that were just like Nightmare on Elm Street that had humor, but it was like stupid. Yeah. But it was real dark. Hellraiser had humor. Yeah. But it was like extremely dark. So, and Hellraiser's not on this list, by the way. It's a horror movie. So now we get to shame Gary.
What? I have no. You two go, because I got nothing on the Goonies.
See, now I looked at that movie this morning, and I'm like, I wonder, could this have been on my, honorable mentions? But you picked it, so good.
To paraphrase Cindy Lauper, the Goonies aren't good enough.
Oh, they are good enough.
Just kidding.
They're very good enough. It's a Richard Donner film. How bad could that be? And Chunk is awesome. Chunk is my hero in this movie, and I just love the idea that it's a bunch of kids, as kids do. They have these wild imaginations that there's this pirate that's got all this treasure, and the Sean Astin character is obviously One-Eyed Willie, which is jokes, people.
Pardon me? See what?
Oh gosh, you have to watch it, Gary.
The character
that's movie directed by Mr. Hyde.
One-Eyed Willie. Yes. That's right. When Goonies never did.
And then Gary, you can do the truffle shuffle. Gary can do the truffle shuffle.
Yeah.
You two go for it.
So no.
So
basically, nobody wants to see that. No, but this Sean Astin character has this idea that there is the treasure. They find a map. They go on this adventure, and where this caves and some kind of, I guess it's a main town, and style town, and it's just the idea that they're going on this adventure, and they actually everybody, like at the beginning of the film, you're not sure if they're onto something or they're just being kids, but obviously it's Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis and whoever.
Wait. Who directed this movie? Was it? I thought it was Richard Donner. Was it Richard Donner?
It was Richard Donner.
It was.
But I think Steven Spielberg had a.
Yeah, he executive produced it.
Yeah. So yes, it was Richard Donner. And I don't know, it's just magical because
Short
it's like
Round is
whatever
in it,
your fantasies are
right?
as a kid, about finding an awesome pirate ship with treasure. I mean, that's like every, kids, that's in kids' imagination,
So
And
everybody
of course,
watch this on a double feature with The Fog, everybody.
that would be cool.
It's all about pirates.
I could honestly see that. Like you need this is a palate cleanser. After you watch The Fog first.
Yeah.
Then you watch the
with
Goonies.
This movie, you got all these kids and they've just gone out on this adventure and to hell with the parents,
Yeah.
And the parents never worried about the kids. They weren't helicopter parents.
No. And this is 80s movies heaven, because you didn't worry about like parents worried about whatever. We're just going to do what we want to
poster
do.
design. I haven't seen the movie, but the poster design of all of them hanging from the stalactite is a great poster.
It is. And Josh Brolin plays the older brother and he's skeptical. He doesn't really want to but he goes along. But but it's a fabulous movie, and I think
I will watch it
and then
someday.
you have what's her name? She's Throw Mama from the Train. It's
I know. I don't remember her name.
I don't either.
It was Anne something, I think.
Anne something. And then you get in the middle of their look of his treasure, and then these like hoodlums, these thugs are looking for it too. And then they have some sort of like guy that's got obviously he's got some like deformities, but Chunk obviously he befriends him. But the funniest scene in the movie to me is when they're these heavies are questioning Chunk, which is the fat kid, and they're saying like confess, and he's like, okay, one time when I was in fat camp, and like he's like telling all this, and it's just awesome. Like this kid is awesome. He's like honestly, I think he is what Dustin is based on.
Exactly. Yes.
So if you like Dustin, you will. I mean, Chunk is this whole entire movie for me. It's like Chunk is my hero.
And we have Sean Astin reappearing in Stranger Things too.
Yeah. So you have a lot of you have Corey Haim. You've got the kid from Temple of Doom. He's in it.
Yeah,
yeah. And Josh Brolin, which again I had a crush on, when I watched this movie, and just Martha.
That's not true, Jason Patrick. She always liked you better.
I don't know. I had my heart for Josh Brolin at the time too.
How fickle! Holy cow!
Yeah, I've had many husbands in my time, mental husbands. So I've gone through the gamut, from Sean Cassidy, Peter Frampton to, where I'm at now. So, so mentally married and divorced many. So,
you need to do you need to do a stream of counting down. You need to do a stream counting down your top 20
of all my
counting down your top 20 mental husbands.
Since I was 5 years old. Donny Osmond.
Wow.
Sean Cassidy.
Oh gosh. Boy, that brings back
here all day. Me and Michelle would be here for hours.
That would actually be pretty funny if you just kind of did your show pictures and just then you get through 40 of them in a couple of hours.
It's more than that. It's way more than that. Totally way more than that.
No, I will see this one because of all the ones I haven't seen, this is probably the one that I would want to see most of.
You really need to.
Of the 80s ones I haven't seen.
You will adore it.
It's a good movie.
It's got Indiana Jones vibes, and it's got I don't know. It's got that Last Starfighter vibe, and even though it's not science fiction, I mean, so it has a lot of that childhood fantasy. Like when you're a kid, it kind of brings you back, and it's just. I saw this in the movie theater. And it was like, oh my God, this is the best. I thought this was the best movie ever.
80s movies are great. Grandma Miranda just said 80s so good. Absolutely.
So
they are.
All right. So here's some. So Josh Brolin made his acting debut in The Goonies as Brand. His name was so stupid. It was Brand Walsh Tooley. It took 5 hours in the makeup chair to transform John Matuszek into Sloth, which is the guy that's deformities. And I'm surprised they haven't tried to cancel this movie because of that. But
I'm honestly surprised. I haven't seen it, but I am honestly kind of stunned based on the reputation of this movie that it hasn't been. They haven't attempted a remake. I'm really surprised.
God, I hope they don't.
No. I mean, aren't you surprised? I mean, they're strip mining everything from the last.
Well, I think
30 years.
I think if the Stranger Things kids were younger, they would just use them, because that's all. They don't really have much imagination, so they find something that works, and then they try to like, okay, well, we'll use these people. They done that with the kid that plays Mike. Like, he's been in 3 or 4 different franchises.
Yeah, he was in the Ghostbusters reboot.
Yeah, so I mean, I get it, but do we have any other talent? They don't. The famous Goonie house was where characters Mikey and Bran Walsh lived. Wasn't some Hollywood-made set. In reality, it was a private residence in Astoria, Oregon. The map used in the movie was speckled with real blood. That's creepy. I'm not sure what the idea with that was, John, but I mean, Robert. Okay. But
that sounds like an urban legend.
It probably is.
It's a good movie, though.
Okay.
So here's my John Carpenter pick.
Yeah.
Okay.
That I rewatched yesterday, which I've forgotten how much I love this movie, and how it's so different than other John Carpenter movies. Is Starman. You know, and I liked it because it was really heartwarming, because it had heart. Like, you know, Karen Black, who plays a woman that had lost her husband, which is Jeff Bridges, and you see her at the beginning of the movie where she's watching video of him, and obviously he's passed away. And at the same time, you see some kind of like entity coming into the atmosphere. You hear like him picking up on like the Rolling Stones Satisfaction, you know, a lot of things that you know, people could relate to, like as far as it was from a you know, something that was sent up into space, like to welcome aliens. And so you see that, and you see that it's like he's just basically a ball of light. And then you see her fall asleep, and then you see this thing crash, and you see this thing looking at everything, looking at pictures of him, and you already know what's going to happen. Like, he's going to take on this form of Jeff Bridges, which he does. And of course, she's obviously shocked. And it's from then on, it's kind of pretty much him and her. Like, he takes her, he makes her, holds a gun to her and makes her drive him to this spot in Arizona where he's supposed to meet his people. And it's more than, it's like a second love story, like, because he looks so much like him. And you know, I just really think this is one of those John Carpenter movies that is so different, and it's so out of the ordinary for him to do that it stands out. And I mean, in between all that, they obviously, the FBI wants to know what this creature is, and it's very good just from their conversations in the car. And obviously, he doesn't act like her husband; he acts like very alien and very emotionless, kind of very strange and very sharp movements. Kind of from when I was reading about this movie, is that Jeff Bridges studied birds, and he took on a bird reaction like to things. So I thought that was very cool and very interesting. But of course, at the end, she falls in love with this being that looks like her husband. But it's so sad, because it's like, here's this woman that's lost her husband, and she sees this baby growing on her floor that turns out to be her dead husband. And it's very good, though. It's very at the end, you just realize, wow, she's really fallen in love with this being, because he's so kind. He doesn't want to hurt her. He just needs help because he's going to die. And I don't know if either one of you seen this movie, but it's definitely worth a watch if you've never.
I saw it once or a couple times back in when it first came out.
Yeah, I've seen it once.
But you're right. This is one of those movies where if you're watching it for the first time and you closed your eyes or looked away at the beginning where it says directed by,
Mhm.
and then you were asked, who would you guess directed this movie? John Carpenter would be the last name you
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that that's what makes it like, but he gives it his spin on it too, as well.
Yeah.
You know,
It was great because it
especially the
showed you that
beginning
he was
scenes.
capable of just not being pigeonholed as like the slasher guy or the
Right,
horror
right,
guy or whatever. So,
right. Um, and I mean, again, the special effects are a little dated, but it's still worth a good. It's still good drama. It's sci-fi drama at its best because it's really like the heart of the show is just their travels and how she gets to know him and how she begins to trust him. And I mean, and then realizing he's a kind being. He's not there to
Mhm.
hurt her. And he's just emulating what he's seen and kind of learned from just looking in the house. And once she realizes that, she realizes that, you know, that he is a very kind, but you part of this the thing is like if this was me, I would be like, this would be hard to look at a person that had died that you
Yeah.
loved,
Mhm.
not be the person, you know. But I
Right.
think that made it very interesting because if it had acted just like him, it wouldn't have had the same impact. I don't know what Michelle thinks or you think, but
I think it
that's
would
kind of how I
be
feel about it.
it would be very hard. Yeah. Because you see this person and oh they look like your husband, you want them to act exactly like your husband, but
Yeah.
yet part of you knows that can't happen because you know that character, her husband, you know, just died and you can never replace that, nor would you ever want to. I've seen the movie I think once, maybe twice, but it is a very good
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, it is. It's an
And
underrated
don't
movie.
forget the short-lived TV spin-off a couple
Yeah,
years later with Robert Hayes.
Yeah, I did watch that. It didn't have the same impact, I guess,
Yeah.
because at the very end of the movie, basically she asks him, "Will I ever see you again?" And he says, "No." And basically, she's pregnant at the end of the movie,
Oh,
which would
wonderful.
be her her husband's son, but
Mhm.
also this being's son because he's got a part of him
Yeah.
too, and he gives these little balls that in that picture. He's handing these little
Yeah.
balls that he can use for all kinds of things, like weapons or whatever.
Yeah.
And he gives her one, and he says, "Give this to him because I'll never see you again." So, to me, the series kind of like it was him coming back to basically like teach his son
Son.
because once he reaches a certain age, he will have these,
Yeah.
I guess, gifts.
And they always, of course,
Yeah.
throw a fugitive element into it, which they did with every other show back in the day.
They did, and it was okay.
Yeah.
I watched a little bit of it, but I wasn't like, I mean, Robert Hayes is a good actor. I mean,
Yeah.
it was nice to see him in a role that he wasn't hokey in.
Yeah.
But I don't think he wasn't Jeff Bridges. And I think that it kind of took away the sadness of the ending of this movie because you're just going to have him come back, you know.
It just shows you some things they should just leave well enough alone.
Yeah, they
Right.
should. But it's definitely a really good movie and a very, very engaging, even though the special effects are dated.
Yeah.
It's really just a very slow and sedate movie too. It's not just like there's not action every second. It's more or less, you know, her coming to terms with this man that looks like this being that looks like her dead husband. And I think that that's
Right.
really, and I like Karen Allen. I think
Yeah, she's
she's
great.
like an awesome actress, and I've
Mhm.
always loved her since Raiders. So I was always a favorite of mine personally. So yeah, it is. It's a lovely movie. I really do love it. So here's some facts. The original screenplay was written by Bruce A. Evans and Reynold Gideon, with Dean Reisner making uncredited rewrites. The movie is not relying on huge budgets and groundbreaking practical effects, unlike many other heavy hitter alien movies in the 80s. This movie actually was postponed for 2 years because E.T. was coming out, and they did not want to
Yeah.
make another movie with that kind of theme. So it actually was held off for like 2 or 3 years. So the movie tells the story. Okay, we did that. The shot scenes in a real meteor crater. Jeff Bridges studied ornithology.
So they have to go out and find a real meteor and have it crash
I
and create
guess
the
so.
crater.
Yeah.
To go out and wow. Okay, that's
Yeah. So
I'm guessing probably in in New Mexico or Arizona where Meteor Crater is.
Well, that's where all the aliens
yeah, and that's
are.
where the end scene in the movie is supposed to be like Winslow, Arizona. But no, I really thought it's a really great film that I just think people don't know about, or if you're into something that's well written, well acted. Oh, and this is also a not woke movie because she tells the Jeff Bridges character that his name is her husband's name was Scott Hayden, that he asked who can make babies, and she said that only women can make babies. So
That's right.
I'm surprised it hasn't been canceled.
Wait, can you hear that? Can you hear that? That's the sound of everybody rushing to their iPhones to cancel this movie.
Right, and they probably will. They probably get around to it. So this is my last choice, I think. It's a 1983 movie called The Dead Zone with Christopher Walken that I just rewatched last night for the whatever time.
The biography of Washington, D.C. No, just kidding.
Yeah, and I really like this because it does have a political edge to it. With the character Martin Sheen, the Stilson character, the Greg Stilson character. But this was made in 1983. It's based on a 1979 book by Stephen King, which I've also read. It's about a character named Johnny Smith who basically is a school teacher, has a pretty mundane life, is involved with another school teacher, and he gets into a horrible car accident, goes into a coma, where when he awakes, he realizes he has a second sight. There's another movie that they tried to make a series about and make it all actiony, which I didn't like.
The actual, I really enjoyed the series.
Did you really?
I did.
With Anthony Michael Hall, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Did you see this film?
After the series.
I don't think I did, but okay.
I tried to watch that, and I was like, I guess because I'm expecting it to be a little bit more like this movie.
Yeah, but we're talking about the movie, so the series was its own thing.
So the reason why I like this movie is it's so like the scenes are very methodical and thought out, and no, I'm sure it's not a perfect movie. Obviously, if you were in a coma for 5 years, you'd probably be brain damaged. You probably wouldn't come out with being able to have second sight, but we'll forget that. But I like it because here's a man that was in love with a woman, and what I think was really sad was when he wakes up, and one of the first things he finds out is that his love of his life that he was waiting for had married another man, and the way his mother tells him is just heartbreaking. She is like, forget her, she's forgotten you, and she's with another man. And the look on Christopher Walken's face, which is awesomely played, he did an awesome job, was so heartbreaking. And I always and then to top it all off, he's seeing visions of things that he wished he wasn't seeing. Like, he saves the nurse's daughter because he touches her hand and he sees that she's in a burning house. And so he tells her, he gets this reputation around town that he's the guy that, it's like his life just went from like mundane to just like horribly depressing. But at the same time, it's such a really great thriller movie because you're just waiting for things to, like what's going to happen next. It's just like he's on the trail of a serial killer. There's so many different elements in this film. And again, Martin Sheen is amazing in this movie too. And toward the end where he realizes the guy that's running for Senate is not who he says he is. And he has to make a decision. And it's just, it's really just a real well thought out film, and every scene is just so beautifully played by Christopher Walken, and it's one of the only films I've seen where he actually acts fairly normal in a movie, because he's always playing these really outlandish characters. Because I think 2 years later he was playing, he was in View to a Kill. And then he was in Batman not too long after that. And he was always playing characters who were just crazy and out there, and as much as his character's, kind of out there in this movie, he is a person that you sympathize with because he doesn't really want this gift at all. He doesn't want it. His doctor, Herbert Lom, from the Pink Panther series, he's great in this movie, is just, sympathetic. But I also think the scene where he touches his hand and tells him that your mother is alive. She survived the Nazis, and here's her name in the phone book. And he initially doesn't believe him, but when he calls in the scene, and it's just so well done. It's so well made, and again, not a happy film per se, but one of the better Stephen King novels, and definitely one of the better Stephen King adaptations.
Absolutely, I agree.
So definitely worth the watch. I mean, there's a couple, Michelle, there's maybe one gory scene really. The rest of the movie is pretty, there's one gory. Actually, I have to fast forward that scene when he finds out who the killer is. And
you hear the phrase, I'm sure, like, if you hear the phrase Stephen King, that immediately calls up a lot of
right. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure,
most of which don't apply to this.
Right. And like I said, this film is so underrated and definitely worth a watch. And it's one of the better Stephen King adaptations for sure. It's definitely got its own vibe. And it's, again, it they created a series as well. For me, it never really I always thought Johnny is more like he wasn't an action figure. And I think maybe that's why the series didn't.
I'm not sure. Maybe it depends on the episode, what you watch, whatever. But I would not describe the series as like an action series. I would almost say it's kind of it's not really a supernatural drama, but it has elements in it, but it's kind of like Quantum Leap, where because of this gift he has, which he does not want to use, he wears gloves so he doesn't touch anybody.
Right.
The way they play out. The Nicole DeBoer, who then played Ezri Dax before that, played Ezri Dax in the last season of DS9, plays the Brooke Adams role in the series. And they have Eric Stoltz, who plays the Stilson character, but that's over like a long multi-season arc. It's not like the driving thing of the show, which is more just his encounters with people and what he does with his gift. But this is a great pick. This is a great underrated movie.
Yeah, I watched it yesterday, and it's one of those shows I can watch over and over again, even though I know what's going to happen. Even though I know that it's not going to be a good ending for the character. Spoilers, but yeah, I still want to watch it because it's like this. Almost like when I rewatch it, I always want I wish that there was a different outcome. Every time that I watch this movie, I wish it would end up different for Johnny because he's such a good person. That's the thing. You really care about this individual. You really care about this person. And he's a good person. And that's what's so as you watch this and you see his eventual demise, that you're just like, oh. But you're always, when I watch it, I always want the best for the character. So that's how you know that the actor's done their job. They make you care about them. So
that's why this is a Stephen King movie and not a Mr. Rogers movie, because it has a bleak ending.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not as bad as Secret Window. That was that was a twist I did not see coming in that show. But that's all she wrote. So that's what we got today.
We have given people a metric ton of great suggestions to go out and watch stuff.
Yes, Time Dead Zone.
Yeah, Elizabeth said, thanks for the movie recommendations. She's definitely added some new ones to her must-watch list, so that's good.
And that's what we do. That's we want to get some feedback from you guys, and we want to give some, because that's how you learn things that are out there. Like I said, if I hadn't known, if she hadn't posted about Lady Hawk, and I did some research and realized, oh, Rutger Hauer's in that show, I probably wouldn't have watched it until she said that in the stream today. So I got a leg up on that one. But again, you know, it's like you never know. The 80s has so much that, again, we're going to touch on next week because we're doing a part 2 or part 3. Who knows? We could do a part 4 probably, but
oh God, there's so much in there. Yeah,
there is.
And there was a lot of great. I know for a fact that there was a lot of popular, well-known fantasy movies in the same vein as the ones Michelle put up that were not mentioned, that can be mentioned in a part 2.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll have Sarah on next week because I have her list already, and we'll go with some more. And then I'm sure between us 3, we can come up with a much more like extensive list of.
I want to keep talking about Lady Hawk so I can keep saying the Alan Parsons Project. You need to pop that back into your, right, Michelle? Andy needs to pop that disc back in her machine and see in the credits where it says music by the Alan Parsons.
I actually just stopped it. Like I didn't watch it.
No, it's at the beginning. It's at the beginning of the opening credits.
I sailed some seas. Okay. I don't know how I missed
whatever
it.
form you watched it.
I love Alan Parsons, but and you think I would recognize that keyboard that he's got a very distinctive sound, but I think I was just put off that Matthew Broderick was in the film at first, and then I'm like, I got over it and saw Rutger Hauer, and I was fine. But anyway, yeah, this has been a lot of fun. We're coming back next week for part 2, and then after that it will be back to the regular program, and then in November we'll come back for the 90s. So
there'll be some more Jason Patrick movies next week, no doubt.
Oh yeah. All right. So it's been great. It's been real. Let's see. I must rewatch some of these. Yes. Thank you, Wen. Thank you. Anyway, guys, we're gonna head out now. Keep it real. Bye.